call the February meeting of the Goshen County Planning Commission together. Madam Secretary, we have a quorum.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Will everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for the invocation?
Please bow our heads. Dear Heavenly Father, please guide this commission to make the right decisions during our meeting this evening. Please watch over our families, friends, and our men and women in uniform that help make our freedom possible. In your name we pray. Amen.
Everyone's received a copy of the minutes of the January meeting of any additions or corrections. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We will now open the meeting up for a citizens' comment period. Anything that's not on the agenda. Something on the agenda, we ask that you wait until that item is called. Seeing none, we close the citizen comment period. Do we have any additions, corrections, any changes?
No, sir, no request to defer additions, deletions, or changes to the order of the public hearings. Our first public hearing item tonight is in District 1, CU 2024-3, application by Goochland County Public Schools, requesting permit, CUP, for an electronic message board on 9.98 acres at Byrd Elementary School, located at 2704 Haydensville Fife Road on tax map number 17108020. The applicant seeks 2 special exceptions to the electronic message board standards in County Zoning Ordinance Section 15416 to allow messages to change more frequently than once per minute and to allow the sign to turn on at 6 a.m. The CUP would consolidate existing CUPs approved for the property. The property is zoned agricultural general A1. The CUP is required by County Zoning Ordinance Section 15416, and the special exceptions are requested under 15416B of the County Zoning Ordinance. The comprehensive plan designates this area as county, state, institutional.
Thank you, Ms. Parker. Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I'm Jamie Sherry, Director of Community Development. The first 2 public hearings I will be presenting are both applications from Goochland Public Schools, both requesting electronic message board signs. Forgive me, the presentations will be somewhat redundant, but I do hope that you do entertain each application individually. So our first application is for a request for an electric message board sign at Byrd Elementary School. That's located on Haydensville Fife. As you can see on the first, it's located in the far western portion of the county. The aerial photo to the right kind of gives you a little bit more context. There's the school with the red. The Haydensville Fife runs north-south at this point, about a mile and a quarter to Route 6. Oh, let me go back real quick. Just kind of looking at the context, there's another photo later in the presentation, but as you can see, the surrounding is mostly farmland and residential lots, large lot residential. The zoning for this property is agricultural general, as is all of the property surrounding it. The school itself, for the comprehensive plan, is designated as public, county-owned, and institutional, which is what all of our public property is designated. And as you can see, the area surrounding it is identified as mostly as rural enhancement area. So as I mentioned, and Ms. Parker mentioned, they are requesting an electronic message board sign. There are 2 special exceptions that they are asking to in the ordinance, and I will go through those in detail in a moment. The sign location, I did want to bring this to your attention. This is just Exhibit B. It shows where the existing sign is, and it is going to be a replacement for that exact sign. So the code has specific standards for electronic message board signs that they would be required to do if they did not ask for the exception. So all the other items that are not on the exception list, they're going to be required to do. I'm going to go to in a little bit of detail of what considerations should be taken. These are all listed in the code as the commission and ultimately the board when making these decisions. So the general requirements, including display and brightness control. Let me get to the right my slide, I can read it better. So some of the things that you should take into consideration, 1 through 7, I'm actually going to go through them in the next couple of slides. I'm not going to read them twice. So the first thing that is suggested that you take into consideration is the proportion of the sign face. On the right is an example of what the sign will look like. It is approximately 60% of the face of the sign, and there will be varied colors. Those are also something you should take into consideration. The location and character, so the character of the area, as I mentioned, this is maybe a little bit better of a picture. You can see, there are houses in close proximity, the closest being 325 feet, and then, and there's one actually 500 feet, and then there's also one at 625 feet in connection with the sign. There is no landscaping proposed for this application. Other considerations should be the actual road network itself. So Haydensville Fife is a 2-lane road. It's classified as a major collector, and the speed limit is 45 miles an hour. The 2 exceptions, I'm going to go through those now. The first one is a code requirement that messages do not change except for once every minute. The applicant is requesting that the sign changes once every 15 seconds. They state that this is so that it provides for better efficiency in messaging for those coming and going to the school. The second exception is to the requirement that requires an automatic dimmer and for it to be turned off, the sign to be completely turned off between 11 p.m. Or as late as the business is open and sunrise. Obviously, it's a school, so it would be closing when school operations are over or 11 o'clock at the latest. They are requesting that they could turn the sign on as early as 6 a.m. Sometimes during the school year, there are activities occurring at the school as early as 6 a.m. and sometimes it's dark, so they were hoping to have the sign on for that. There was a community meeting held back in January. There was one citizen that came and was supportive of the application. We have received no other correspondence. So as Ms. Parker mentioned, there is this is an attempt to combine former, any parcel that, any other conditional use permit that's on that parcel to kind of compile it into one. There was one other conditional use permit on this property for a mobile classroom, and I believe I have it circled right there. There's no changes to this CUP activity. It would continue to go. The conditions I have at the end, if you want to look at them, if anything was done, they were just made standard, but no change to the activity or requirements. And then for the electronic message board sign, the conditions that staff, this is a summary, staff recommends that the use is allowed as a message board sign. The appearance be similar to Exhibit A, which was shown in the presentation. Site plan, the location would be where that replacement was identified in Exhibit B. Transfer or lease is one of our standard conditions, so if for some reason the school were to change and become another use or another school, they would have to notify the county and then give notification to whoever the new leasee or owner is that these conditions exist. If you were to grant the exceptions, 15 seconds is what they're requesting for each change, and brightness for it to be 6 a.m. The next presentation that I have for you actually has a little bit more detail. I'm going to go into just a very quick summary, and this may help you make your decision. All of this was in the staff report, but I realized that I went quicker on this one, thinking this one was second. I apologize. So back in 2020, Goochland County adopted a complete rewrite of the ordinance. the zoning ordinance. And part of that process, they did include electronic message board signs. Since 2020, we do have 4 that have been approved. There are 5 in the county. One is at Reynolds Community College. Each of the others did request, all but one requested some sort of exception on the message board changing. The first one that was approved was Salem Baptist Church, and that was approved with a 15-second message change. The second one, the next ones that were approved were Randolph Elementary School and the high school, middle school. They came in at the same time. They got approved for 15 seconds on both of those. Other exceptions for those also included they requested a 7 o'clock start time for the lights for both of those. And then for the high school, middle school, they actually requested a double-sided sign that had different messages on it because one was for the middle school, one was for the high school. That's what was approved. We also had a sign from Tommy's Car Wash on Broad Street Road. That was approved with the 1 minute because they did not ask for any exceptions. That's a quick version of what happened. I'd be happy to answer any of your questions. Representatives from the schools are here as well. Yes, sir.
Just out of curiosity, if someone was passing the school at 45 miles an hour, which is the speed limit, how many sign changes could they see from the time they came within the eyesight of a normal person until they passed by?
That might be a better question for the applicant. I know that I did do an evaluation for Salem Baptist Church because there was a topography change. I did not do that for this because there's really the same property. Yeah, for this one, yeah. So I don't know the answer to that exactly. I could get my math calculator out and do a little bit while you talk to the applicant if you'd like.
Well, did the applicant ask?
Yeah, then, let me see.
So as you know, the schools are in a, oh, this is Debbie White. I'm the Chief Financial Officer and Capital Projects Manager for Goochland County Public Schools. So we are expecting the signs to operate very similarly to what's happened in front of the Goochland Middle School and High School. We have during pickup and drop-off times, there is a 25 mile per hour. So people will slow down. We don't expect at 45 miles per hour, just like we don't expect at the middle school, high school, for people to be able to see that sign, but one image as they go by at that speed. So we're really trying to capture the parents, the guardians that are picking up and dropping off their children to be able to see a sign change if we're trying to convey 2 different messages. Okay.
What kind of messages would you anticipate needing a 15-second change? And why so frequent?
If they're trying to communicate 2 messages, for example, they might want to say, you know, book fair is open, and then a second message saying, no school on February 16th. So they might be trying to convey 2 messages while the parents are pulling into the area instead of just one. The elementary schools have less of a message change because they have less activity. Unlike the high school with sports every day, lots of different events going on.
Any other questions? Thank you. I'll now open it up for a public hearing. Anyone wants to speak? We'll close the public hearing.
I have a question, Mrs. Sherry.
Yes, sir.
Are the exceptions that are requested at Byrd, you stated earlier, I believe that they are the same as Randolph, is that correct?
There is one difference. They are requesting an earlier sign turn on. They were approved for and asked for 7 o'clock for both the high school, middle, and Byrd. This application came in with 6.
And the interval, the 15-second interval is approved? at
Yes,
Randolph?
those are all consistent.
Okay.
What time does school start?
That's another question for the applicant.
We have school starting as early as 7:30. Staff start arriving at 7, the teaching staff. But we have custodians and cafeteria workers arriving fairly early. So because we don't have a name on the sign, it is our signage. So the electronic sign will actually say Byrd Elementary School, Goochland Elementary School. We have milk deliveries coming in very early in the morning. So we were just trying to, just trying to get that name up fairly early.
Thank you.
I think those things all the time, and I get to use one of them now, see it at home, feel that.
But it seems like to me that all the ones that we have in the county, all of them have got an exception to the 1 minute.
Yeah, I can,
So maybe the ordinance needs to be changed.
yeah, that's a good, that is a very good point. So, so what happened during the 2020 rewrite, I hear this through history. I was not here during the rewrite, but I have reported on all of the previous cases. There was some benchmarking that was done, and the attempt was to, they landed on 1 minute. It varied from various locations to 15 seconds to a minute, maybe a little bit longer. Some never get to change. And it was a combination of economic development, planning staff, and local businesses that actually landed on that 1 minute. But I do agree that might be something that at this point in time, maybe we would want to revisit.
I think it's probably not as critical for schools because the speed limit is
Dropped.
25 miles an hour.
During
As opposed to 250 where you're going 55 or 60.
Yeah.
You try to change every, I mean, it could cause all kinds of accidents by people trying to read the sign, so maybe it ought to be adjusted based on the location and the speed limit.
All right, thank you.
We're here to vote on this one.
I move that the commission recommend approval of conditional use permit CU 2024.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Next.
The motion to recommend approval passes on a 5-0 vote. This case will be scheduled for public hearing before the Board of Supervisors on April 16th, 2024, with a recommendation of approval from the Planning Commission. Our next public hearing item is in District 2, CU 2024-4, application by Goochland County Public Schools requesting a conditional use permit, CUP, for an electronic message board on 104.35 acres at future Goochland Elementary School, located at 2000 Bulldog Way on tax map number 421103T. The applicant seeks 2 special exceptions to the electronic message board standards and County Zoning Ordinance, Section 15416, to allow messages to change more frequently than once per minute, and to allow the sign to turn on at 6 a.m. The CUP would consolidate existing CUPs approved for the property. The property is zoned agricultural limited A2. The CUP is required by County Zoning Ordinance, Section 15416, and special exceptions are requested under 15416B of the County Zoning Ordinance. The comprehensive plan designates this area as county state institutional.
Thank you, Ms. Parker. Gentlemen, for the record, I'm Jamie Sherry, Director of Community Development. This second application that I'm presenting to you is also from Goochland County Public Schools. We do have the request for the new GES, the Goochland Elementary School. This is also a request for the 2 exceptions. This is on a much larger piece of property, and I'll explain a little bit why in a moment, over 100 acres. So the school is located here in the Goochland Courthouse. You can see on the aerial to the right, the property is currently under construction, so it is shown as a blank on our parcels because there has not been a flyover recent enough to show it. But you can see the high school, middle school located on the same property, even though there's a road running through it, that is the same property. We have residential, smaller lot. It's a, I wouldn't go as far as small lot, but this is Holland Hill subdivision, and then some business as the county government and some other larger lot residential. So you can see the zoning map. As I mentioned before, you have the residential over here, which is the subdivision Holland Hills. The parcel itself is zoned agricultural limited. There are some business locations right here. Those are currently vacant. That is where the extension for the Fairgrounds Road will go. And then once again, the comprehensive plan has the school as public, as they do for all of them. So this is the presentation I meant to show you first in the attempt to not be repetitive. But so just to kind of summarize once again, 4 have been approved, 5 if you include, we have 5 if you include the college. Those are all the seconds, 15, 15, 15, and then Tommy's had asked for none, so they got 1 minute, which is the standard. So for the elementary school, this is a site plan. Oh, that's not the right one, is it? That's not even the right one. I'll be able to show you in a second. I'll double back. My apologies. Oops, I'm going the wrong way. Okay, so you can see the sign location on this slide. So this is the sign location, and then this is also the proximity to the residents. We'll go back to that after I talk a little bit about the considerations. So same considerations as last time. You have the proportion of the sign face. This is approximately 20%. Colors will also be varied. General character, I had mentioned there are residential lots that are behind the area. There will be the parking lot located and then the school. And so there will be some distance, but there will be some things actually, it won't be necessarily facing those schools, the residences. Mostly large lot, single family and farmland on the other side. 2 closest houses are approximately 725 and 775 feet, so a little bit farther. No landscaping is proposed for this sign. The speed limit on Bulldog Way, again, it's 2 lanes. Its speed limit is 40 during regular hours. I think as Ms. White referenced, this 2 drops down to 25 because it is a school zone and it is classified as a local road. The 2 exceptions they are requesting, the first one is 15 seconds instead of the 1 minute standard, same reasoning. And the turn on to be at 6 a.m. instead of at sunrise. And again, closing at business or turning off at business or 11 o'clock. So there was a community meeting also held on January 3rd that was here at the building, and there was no attendees from the community. Staff has not received any additional comments to this request. So as we said, there is an effort to combine all the conditional use permits onto one. There are several on this overall larger site. At the top, you'll see the location of the future school. There was a conditional use permit, I believe it was 2021, that does allow for a school. They were required to get a plan of development and a lighting plan. They've done all of those things because it's now under construction. The cell tower, the location is right there towards the woods. Cell tower, 199 feet maximum. They have to follow all the federal rules. There's a fenced area and a conceptual plan that identifies where it is. And then the Goochland County Middle School, High School complex, they got an electronic message board sign approved 2 years ago. The complex is shown on there. The school was built prior to a conditional use permit being required for a school, which we have now. So there is no CUP for that. So essentially the same exact conditions are recommended to the commission. There used to be an electronic message board sign, similar appearance to the exhibit that was shown as Exhibit A. The site plan, the location of the sign, the same standard lease or transfer. If it goes, both county has to know as well as the new leasee or owner. And then lastly, if you approve the exceptions, it would be 15 seconds instead of 1 for the frequency of the display and the brightness to be allowed to turn on at 6 a.m. or earlier, whichever is the sunrise. So that is this version of that presentation. I'd be happy to answer any of your questions.
This sign is, I do, this sign is a lot smaller than the other one. The other one, I think, was 60% of the area.
The other one was 60, this one was 20%, I believe. Let me
Why
go
the
back to the,
reduction in size?
I think it's just a different model. That is something that maybe Ms. White can answer for you as well. Let me go back to the sign.
I just wasn't sure if it had anything to do with the village courthouse.
So, she's talking about the whole sign, and, it is actually down sort of the slope changes, and so there's a big base to the sign, a concrete base with some, stone brickwork, above it. That's that sort of darker L. And then if you were to look at this top where the electronic portion is, that's about exactly the same as at Bird. So it's really sort of how that's slipping into the sign itself, the monument part of it. And a lot of that has to do with where it's located. It is on a downward slope, and so we had to make sure that that base was secure before we put an electronic sign on it.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, it is, it's just a larger sign.
Right,
It
right,
still
right.
fits the requirements. It can't be above 10 feet tall, you know, on the
Ground level.
the
Just a
ground level.
ratio, right? Okay, thank you.
Yes, the sign would have to meet our ordinance level, and it does accommodate for the slope in our ordinance.
Okay, thank you. Is that it? Open it up for public comment? Seeing none, close the public comment period. Board?
I move that the commission recommend approval of conditional use permit CU 2024-00004 for electronic message board at 2000 Bulldog Way, subject to the imposed conditions as presented.
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carried.
The motion to recommend approval passes on a 5-0 vote. This case will be scheduled for public hearings before the Board of Supervisors on April 16th, 2024, with a recommendation of approval from the Planning Commission. Our next item on tonight's agenda is District 3, CU 2024-1, application by River Run Manor LLC, requesting renewal of a conditional use permit, CUP, case CU 2019-11, for a public assembly place on 61.302 acres located at 2421 River Road West on tax map numbers 545090 and 5430C3. The property is zoned agricultural limited A2. The CUP is required by County Zoning Ordinance Section 15112 in accordance with Section 15290. The comprehensive plan designates this area as a rural enhancement area.
Thank you, Ms. Parker. Members of the commission, Tom Coleman, Principal Planner. As Ms. Parker said, this is a request for a conditional use permit. It is a request for a renewal of a conditional use permit for a place of public assembly. The subject property is located just east of the Goshen Courthouse Village. Looking at the aerial photo, you see that the area does reflect a rural, low-density development pattern, and it does back up to the James River. The subject property and all the surrounding properties are designated as rural enhancement areas in the comprehensive plan, and the subject property and all the surrounding properties are zoned agriculturally. For many years, this property was a residence. In 2019, the applicants did get an approval for a CUP for a place of public assembly. They do reside on site. The lower levels of the building include ballrooms and suites and lounge and areas and so forth, areas that are used for the public assembly activity, and then they live on upper floors. Just a couple of pictures of the site. It is a gorgeous facility, gorgeous piece of property. Looks like a wonderful place to have a place of public assembly and to host special events. Looking at the, it's kind of zooming in on the site plan. The main house is about 22,000 square feet. There is a pool house that includes a pool and sort of a tennis area that can be used for assembly activities. And there is a parking area and an overflow parking area between the structures and River Road West. This is just a reflection of the PUD plans, and this just sort of highlights some of the items that were on the aerial photo, including the main house, the pool house, the tennis court area, the parking area, and the overflow parking area. Just some of the measurements kind of show you where this is in proportion to some of the closest dwellings and landmarks. It is about 2,000 feet south of River Road West. The closest dwellings are about 700 and 730 feet away, and those are in River Cliff subdivision. This parcel is actually a part of River Cliff subdivision, and it is about 1,000 feet to the other bank of the James River. With the CUP application, the applicant did request a number of changes to the CUP conditions. They are not proposing any changes to the site plan or to the buildings, but they did request some changes to the CUP conditions. I have those listed here. They did want to increase the cap on the number of guests. They wanted to increase the number of CUP activities they could have. They did want to extend the hours of operation for 1 hour on Fridays and Saturdays for indoor activities. They did have a restriction on the number of times they could have amplified sound outdoors. They wanted to remove that. They want to have fireworks, and they also wanted to extend their approval for a 10-year renewal period. When we get to the CUP conditions, I will highlight these requests, and you'll see the recommended conditions that are coming to the Planning Commission and how they address these requested changes. There was a community meeting held in December. There were 8 attendees there, including Commissioner Myers. The applicants, they did go very specifically over those proposed changes. They're very clear about that with the community. Generally, the attendees expressed the support for the renewal. In fact, several of them expressed strong support for it. No one really expressed any opposition to them continuing their use. Some people did have some concerns. They were concerned about the idea of having fireworks here. They were concerned about, one person requested a 5-year renewal, another 5-year renewal rather than a 10-year renewal. But except for specific things like that, generally the attendees were supportive of the application. I'll show you this chart. I won't necessarily go over it with detail, but we can refer back to it just so the commission knows that it does sort of look at some of the river run. It looks at the 2019 conditions, which are the current conditions that they operate under. You will see next to that where the changes, I really didn't highlight the changes, but you can see where some of the changes, if the Planning Commission were to recommend the conditions that you'll see in a moment. It also compares it to Dover Hall, Bandits Ridge, Running Mare, and Adams International School. One thing to note, one similarity that all of these venues have is they've all come before the board twice, and this is River Run Manor's second time. And no 2 venues are exactly the same. They have different acreages. They have different facilities on site. They have their different locations in the county. So a lot of the CUP conditions, they'll address the same items, but how they operate, how many people they can have, as we get into the specifics, they can vary from application to application. But like I said, I'll go on through there, but I can certainly refer back to that if that helps the commission in their consideration of the application. As we move into the CUP conditions, I'll stop, as I mentioned earlier, to kind of highlight some of the changes that reflect specific changes that they had requested. The first condition would allow the place of public assembly. The second one would tie them to the PUD plan that I showed you earlier. The third one would require them to have 75 parking spaces. They did have a parking waiver to allow them to have gravel parking. It would allow that to continue. Their access road has to meet fire rescue and Department of Community Development requirements. They would continue with that. They are allowed to have that one detached sign. And the seventh one would require them to have a lighting plan for any permanently installed exterior lighting. As we get into 8 and 9, I'll slow down a little bit here and talk about some of the changes. They do have a building capacity limit of 299 people, and that also corresponds with the CUP limit. They requested to go more than 299. What staff's recommendation is to keep the CUP at 299. The county code specifically allows an owner or a property owner that has a CUP to get a special event permit for larger events. And that would really be on a case-by-case basis. It doesn't cap the number of people, it doesn't cap the number of times they could do it. They simply would utilize the special event process that's in the county code to have larger events, to host larger events than 299 people. I mean, staff's position of that does offer the applicant more flexibility, but also allows the county agencies, especially the public safety agencies, building inspections, fire rescue, health department, to kind of know when a larger event is going to take place at a venue. In this case, at River Run Manor. As far as the event limit, previously, they were allowed to have 40 primary events. The recommendation is coming for you now is probably a little more consistent with what we would see with other applications. It basically, for events fewer than 50 attendees, they could have one per day, so that would basically be 7 per week. Events with 50 or more attendees, they could have 2 per week. And as you may recall, for like a wedding, we will allow them typically to also hold some accessory events. So like if they have a wedding, they could have like a rehearsal dinner and maybe a luncheon the next day, and we would all count those as one event. So here they could have the 2 primary events. Each primary event could have 2 accessory events. So that would allow them really to have 13 events per week. So that is a significant increase over the 40. And that is, and I mentioned earlier, they did get approval before. They have not been generating any complaints from the neighbors. So it is normal for us to offer, to afford these venues additional flexibility once they've demonstrated they can comply with their CUP. As far as event hours, they requested one minor change, and that was to extend the hours for indoor events only for Friday and Saturday. And again, seems to be a fairly insignificant request, and that would be for indoor events only. They have excluded several holidays. Amplified noise, the restriction that was on them currently or previously was actually probably a little more restrictive than other venues have had. They were limited to having outdoor amplified music 6 times per year. This would remove that limit of 6, and it would bring them into a condition that's more consistent. Not all venues have the same condition, but we generally will allow them to have amplified music as long as it's within a structure, a tent with flaps or a building or something like that. So this does offer them some more flexibility in offering outdoor amplified music. The uniform security, it's the same condition we're carrying forward. Alcohol consumption, consistent with what we typically see for a venue. Fireworks, they have specifically requested to utilize, to have fireworks here. The board has pretty consistently supported not having fireworks at these venues. So this comes before the Planning Commission with a recommendation to continue that prohibition on fireworks at this venue facility. Staff's main concern is, I mentioned earlier, this venue, like many other venues, they haven't been generating complaints. They haven't been, when they come up for renewal, they're generally more supported by the community. And there's just a concern that introducing fireworks is going to introduce an impact that doesn't exist. And, I think that's just the main reason for not supporting fireworks. They submitted the traffic impact analysis, which demonstrated they weren't creating any unsafe or capacity issues there. The restriction on discharging firearms for CUP activities, and then the annual notice and is sort of typical, and the transfer lease is the typical condition that you would see. And as far as the expiration date, they did request a 10-year renewal. Typically, a renewal would come back to the Planning Commission with a recommendation for a 10-year renewal, so that was a good one to provide. But I think that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions that you have.
Can we review the parking situation, please? I think you said there were 75 current spaces?
Correct.
Because if they have guests arrive 4 per vehicle, would still be way, way short of handling 75.
Well, I think one thing that happens, and without talking about River Run Manor specifically, but when we have these special event permits, that does allow consideration of things like having trailers or something, or buses bring people, or what am I trying to say, from another location, to have a remote parking area, and just to include those on a case-by-case basis. They do have an overflow parking area, so they could use an overflow parking area, but the idea of an overflow parking area is it should not be used very often. It should only be there, used occasionally. But, yeah, that 75 spaces is sort of based on, to accommodate the 299 capacity that they have today.
Where would the other parking take place in that area?
Well, that hasn't been, there's no plan that I'm aware of, to handle that parking. If they were to obtain a special event permit, that would provide an opportunity to come up with a specific plan to address parking for the subject event.
Generally, when we do the renewals, we're not changing the existing, when we extend them for 10 years, we're not doing a lot of changes inside of the renewal. This one, we're asking for some pretty serious changes with twice as many people, and to go to 10 years, we're asking for a big change and then going to 10 years also.
I would say it's not unusual to offer a little additional flexibility. I would say, for example, a good one would be number of events. Hypothetically, if they're restricted to maybe 1 or 2 events per week, maybe in a renewal, they're given an opportunity to do a few more events. So I would say it's normal to tweak it a little bit, and it generally does offer them a little more flexibility.
Have there been any complaints from the community?
This has not generated any complaints that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Would the applicant like to speak?
So there's,
Is there anything you want to look at?
I think she's got one she's pulling up. Hi, you all. Thank you so much for having us. Thanks, Tom. I'm Kim Moody, 2421 River Road West. And, okay, perfect. Just a couple quick things to follow what Tom was saying and answer some questions that might come up for you all. We do require any events on our property over 120 guests, they bus them in. So while we do definitely need to entertain parking for a larger number, it's less of a concern because contractually they are obligated to provide charter buses. That's how we keep everybody so safe. Additionally speaking, one of the reasons, just to shed a little bit of light on the flexibility we were asking for, instead of it being so specific to how many per day or how many per week, we just asked for the general number because weather in Virginia has a big capacity to be able to rent weddings. So spring and fall are really busy times of the year. Currently, we're receiving inquiries for as far out as 2027. So a 10-year renewal is what we thought we had to ask for until we recently found out another venue in Goochland received a 15-year renewal. So just wanted to mention that, especially with luxury weddings, these brides are booking out 2.5 years pretty consistently. We did do the meeting in person at the property in December, inviting all of the neighbors. However, a couple of days afterwards, we did have 8 in attendance. We did find out that the Postal Service failed us a little bit, even though we sent our letters out 3 weeks in advance. Some of the neighbors did not receive those. So we additionally, just a few weeks ago, hosted a Zoom call as a courtesy to help alleviate any concerns and hear information from our neighbors. So that's sort of how we came up with where we've gotten so far. So long story short, we've been a wedding planning company and have worked together the past 20 years. We have managed my wedding planning business, Kim Moody Design, successfully throughout that whole time. including what we've done as a planning company as well as what we've done at River Run, we're at over 1,400 weddings. So we have seen a thing or two. Many of those were actually in Goochland long before River Run existed. I've worked at Tuckahoe a lot. I've worked at Dover many times. I've worked at lots of private estates, the Meadows, et cetera. So we have, as a company, transitioned into managing the property, and that's our full-time commitment now. And so we're really excited to do that. River Run's average client budget is somewhere between $80,000 and $120,000. They have very high expectations, as you can imagine. So we have to run a pretty tight ship, which is one reason for the buses being such an important part of that. We've got over 200 5-star reviews on Google, Wedding Wire, The Knot, Facebook, et cetera. No complaints so far, so hopefully we'll always keep that up. A few other quick things just for Goochland. I wanted to mention we frequently fill the Residence Inn, which, as y'all know, is in Goochland County. We all benefit from the lodging taxes there, so that's an important thing. They are our number one referral partner when it comes to lodging. We also bring a lot of tourism to Goochland, and it's the good tourism, the single day or just the weekend. Then they're out and they're back to their world in Northern Virginia and Maryland or wherever they're from. So we're filling the restaurants. We're doing our part with the wineries, the cideries, the distilleries, the local shops, the retail businesses, et cetera. And River Run has a private wine label through Elk Island Winery, so supporting that ag tourism arm as well. At the very beginning, 2019, when we were last in front of you all, we've had a lot of ups and downs since then, global pandemic, quite a process with the building conversion to make it into a mixed-use facility. And we've run the internet 6 or 7 miles from Crozier all the way to Maidens. So hopefully that would be a helpful thing to the board of supervisors as they make this consideration from you all. We want to breeze through some of the next slides because Tom has covered a lot of it already, but Andrew just was going to go over the chart a little bit quickly.
I'm Andrew Moody, of course, 2421 River Road West. We created a similar slide just to show what we applied for in our application, what our current conditions are, and some of the conditions that we wanted to discuss. It's 5 years ago when we first came before the Planning Commission and the board, we were not known throughout the community, or we didn't have an established reputation, so we certainly understand restrictions being placed upon a first-time applicant for a conditional use permit. So that's, while we're back here, we're up for our renewal, and we are asking for some of those restrictions to be relaxed so that we can operate in a more equitable manner as other venues in the county. We discussed the limit on the number of guests, and I put parking right below that, as you could see, to kind of compare where we are, what we have in parking, and Kim mentioned the charter transportation, but we just asked for 700 on our application. We certainly, we said that we're totally fine keeping that a little bit lower at 500. And of course, keeping the 299 indoors due to the fire safety. And as you can see, the comparison to other venues, Dover Hall has 400. They have 63 parking spots for their 400 that they're allowed. And Adams International School is allowed 700, and they have 53 parking spaces. And they both have 299 indoor limits on their conditional use permits. So I'm just wanted to show a comparison of why we're asking what we're asking for. And we also, we did the 75 required parking spaces. We also have that overflow, and it's on, I believe it was like the second or third slide, where it was like a little dotted in drawing of the overflow parking. And so we do have that there, and it's about 40 additional spaces. So we have quite a few extra parking spots. As far as limit on the CUP activities go, the amount, again, we just requested 1 per day to be in comparison, to be fair with Bandits Ridge. They're allowed 1 per day. We saw what the county recommended in their staff report, and we are okay with limiting us to less than 1 per day. But instead of it being the 50 guests, we asked for it to be 80 guests because we consider that an intimate wedding. We have a lot of weekday weddings that are intimate weddings that have less than 80 guests. So that's why we requested 80 instead of 50. And then 150 total instead of 2 per week, because there are, as Kim mentioned, there are heavy times of the year, such as April and May, September, October, where we could have a weekend where it's 3 in a weekend, just because of how the demand for those dates. There may be an entire month where we don't have an event in the summer. So that's why we, instead of it being limited to an amount per week, we would feel more comfortable if it was just a total amount overall. One of the last things is, this was just brought up earlier today, so I apologize it wasn't in our application or in the staff report. It was just brought to our attention today that another venue, which is Running Mare, they applied for when they renewed their conditional use permit, they requested 15 years and the board granted that. We were not aware that that was an option. When we applied, we were told 10 is what the standard is. That's what everybody does. So we did not know until we found out earlier today. So would like to amend that request on how long, and just to piggyback on what Kim said, the people are booking years and years out, and this is a very long process. We filled out the application back in late September, turned it in October, and it's not something we want to do every 5 to 10 years. We're a very established business. If there are complaints against us, we can certainly change what we're doing. But we prefer to not have to go through this process more times than we need to. And so I think Tom touched on the other the other requests that we had made, and we're fine with the staff recommendations on those. There was one minor change I talked to Tom about, was the lighting plan, that we needed to have a approval for all temporary and permanent lighting on the facility. Tom and I spoke about, he was hoping we could make a clarification on that if you all are agreeable. Temporary, one of the slides, it shows like some bistro lighting. And that's something that gets put in like every weekend. They just hang the bistro lighting like on temporary poles. I can't imagine having to submit a permit every week for temporary bistro lighting, like Christmas lights, basically. So I just wanted to note that change in the way that it's worded, as temporary should be defined to not include bistro Christmas lights, and that's our suggestion.
Event lighting, separate.
Right.
And just to kind of breeze through this really quickly, we knew fireworks was going to be the thing that caused the most contention. We'd been warned about that 5 years ago, and we didn't know about why until recently, but now we've learned. And so we've talked to the neighbors quite specifically about many of these points, and so that's where this slide came from. We had Mr. Davies, the fire marshal, out for a site visit. He met with our recommended contractor, Brandon, who's the only person that would be launching on the facility. Each time there would be a fireworks display request from one of our clients, it would go through the typical Goochland County permits. If weather or dry temperature or dry conditions did not allow for it, certainly Mr. Davies would decline the permit and the event would not have it. Length of show is something that we wanted to really highlight. It always would be under 5 minutes with events. People's attention spans are about 90 seconds. They've also been drinking. They want to get back to the dance floor. In this specific situation, we have a location on the property, only one spot that's considered a safe launch site, and that happens to be where the guests would view it from the front of the house, which is not going to be ideal for most of our people, because most people do the receptions in the lower ballroom, which is on the riverside, and there's no safe launch site on the riverside. So that further is going to deter people from wanting to do this, because their events would have to end earlier, or they would have to shuffle 150 people upstairs and out the front door for 90 seconds and then back in. So I don't think it's going to be something very popular in general, but we do have people that leave us and go to other venues that are allowed to have fireworks, and obviously every rental really counts when you have a mortgage like we do. So we don't want to be the ones that are deterring that. We have put in there that it would always be completed before 10 p.m., but recommended by 9:30. And then the shell size was based on the safe launch location. So just to kind of go through a couple of highlights. And then we did have Brandon from Signature Sparks, who is one of our DJ referral partners. He works at the venue in a DJ capacity, but also has he's a licensed pyrotechnic. So he has a couple of slides here that may be helpful for you all, just to kind of review a few different components about it. So the map is up here, and then Brandon, if you want to answer any questions and kind of go through it. So the viewing audience area is noted there. So just introduce yourself.
First of all, good evening to you all. I wanted to dispel a couple issues or misconceptions. The fireworks that you guys are used to seeing, 4th of July, New Year's Eve, those are called 1.3G fireworks. Those are called display fireworks. They're huge, they're very big. We will not be using those here. There's not enough room, and those are very dangerous. What I use are called 1.4G, also known as Class B fireworks, that are consumer professional fireworks. So they're the same thing that you can buy on the roadside. All the difference is I'm a professional and I won't set myself on fire. I do own 2 licenses in the state of Virginia. I am a legal professional. This is what we do. The shell size that we shoot are very small. Now, we noticed some of the neighbors were worried about their pets and livestock. Well, if you look, on the next slide, if you look, that green line is where the fireworks sounds are. One that I forgot to put in was a thunderstorm. Thunderstorms go all the way up to 180 decibels. Now, we cannot control the frequency of when or where thunderstorms happen. But being born and raised in Virginia, I know we have lots of thunderstorms, and you guys get them pretty bad in Goochland. So the one thing about us having fireworks there, we can control and let everybody know and prepare them ahead of time. I also know that there are lots of shotgun blasts in Goochland because, you know, you guys have very big deer here because I've hunted them over the years. A police siren, we've heard one earlier. These are other things that are being much louder. Now, these decimal levels are from if we were standing right on top of the fireworks. The further you go away, the less the decimals are. So the equivalent, I would say, to the neighbor with how far the neighbors are, it'd be maybe a small caliber pistol going off. That's what they'd hear. They won't see large blooming displays in the sky. The fireworks I shoot will go maybe 135 to 150 feet tops in the air. They're very small in stature. Like I said, the maximum size that I'd be using would be 1.5 inches for safety reasons, and because that's the area granted.
And for 3 minutes.
For 3 minutes, but I'll be honest with you, I'm not cheap. So most people get a couple minutes because that's what they can afford. Because it is a lot of licensing and insurance. There's a lot of insurance. So I do this as a part of my business, so it's not cheap at all to do this. So most people keep it around a 2 minute, which is called my finale. So it usually lasts about 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes, and then it's over. So my setup time is a lot. Basically, I set up for 2 hours to fire 1.5 minutes.
So the total fireworks display is
Excuse me, sir?
total display ones.
Total display would be over and done with. The longest display I would do would be 5 minutes, but normally a finale usually lasts about 1.20 minutes to 2 minutes. So it's over and done with. So that's from start to finish.
And what time of day fireworks?
The fireworks shows normally will be once, depending on the type of the time of year, but once it got dark enough, so they would be visible for the bride and the grooms. So it'd be a little later in the spring and the summer, but again, we would cap the time because one, we understand neighbors like to go to sleep, so we don't want to wake anybody up. Although the sound won't carry that far, we don't want it to. We want to be respectful and responsible to
Before
your
10
neighborhood.
p.m.
Before 10 p.m., definitely.
Got it.
That's a rule of thumb, always before 10. That's a rule of thumb, no matter what time of the year, always before 10 o'clock.
Thank you. So you're asking us today to drop from 700 to 500?
Correct. We have made a couple of.
There you go.
Right.
Those are the,
Your updated request?
yes, sir. So where it says updated request is what we have lowered our request to.
Okay.
And those are the 3 differences on what our application said. Sorry, I'm not in front of the mic, but limit on the number of guests, and then also the limit on the amount of activities. We're asking for it to be 80 instead of 50, and then also, instead of 2 per week, just 150 even on the ones that are over 50 guests. Well, I guess I should say over 80 guests. And then we're asking for a change on the renewal period length to 15 years. Those are the 3 changes that we're requesting.
Right, thank you.
What's the lighting?
The lighting was maybe just a definition that may need to be defined in the actual CUP before it's voted on, just how defining temporary, which temporary would not include Christmas lights or bistro lights is what we're asking for. The language in that to be updated.
Clarify something for me. You're saying that the amount of events, you would want to have more per week during the spring and summer and maybe not have, spring and fall, and not have any at all in the summer, but you want a total of, I forget where it says, but it sounds like you want the same total, but you want to fit it into a smaller period of time.
Correct. So just speaking a little bit about 2024, we had a wedding on, I think we had 2 in January. We have 1 rehearsal dinner this month, and we don't have another wedding until March 9th. So they go pretty heavily from mid-March to late June, mid-June, and then again, starting up in August, and they pretty much stop altogether the week before Thanksgiving.
And what's the maximum you would have per week?
In my opinion, or Kim would speak better to this because of her wedding planning experience, but I would say 3 typically would be the maximum that we would have that would be over 80 guests, is if it was a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, back-to-back on a very popular month. So,
That's a lot of work.
right, I don't think we'd want to take more than 3 per week.
We're not a big enough company for that.
Tom, I have a question for you. Did we approve the 15-year through the planning commission, or did the board make that change?
The board, no, the board did. They had requests for 15-year renewal rather than the 10, the board granted 15-year.
Okay.
Any other questions from the applicant?
Thank you.
I'll now open it up for public comment.
Thank you.
Thank you. We don't want to close the public comment period.
Want to define, just looking at the different conditions
Yeah, the lighting.
and adjustments, yeah.
Right.
And the lighting might be something that staff can help define.
If, to include the bistro Christmas lighting, would we have to put some?
No, actually, the lighting ordinance excludes festive lighting like Christmas lights.
Okay.
And if it's what I envision, the string lights that are sort of like Christmas lights, those are not included. Those are excluded from requiring a lighting plan.
So we don't have to do anything with.
Correct,
about that.
correct.
Tom, on their presentation, they showed where they were having the fireworks. And on your presentation, you showed overflow parking. They seem to be really close together.
I'm sorry, Mr. Dick.
On their presentation, they showed where the fireworks would be, the
where the
approved
overflow
launch point, or whatever they call it.
Right.
And it is right on top of where the
Overflow parking,
parking is.
yes.
Is that normal? I mean, I
I
guess
mean, no one
fire
has,
marshal took that overflow parking into consideration when,
I mean, I would defer to the fire marshal, but I think he simply found a location on their site where they could operate the fireworks. I mean,
thanks.
Good evening, Doug Davies, Fire Marshal, Goochland County. To answer your question, the site that we narrowed down to, the overflow parking and some of the regular parking are incorporated into the fallout zone. They have to have 100 feet for every inch of shell, so they need 150 feet of fallout zone. So where we're setting up at, it is going to take some of the overflow and the regular parking, and we discussed how they would have to block that off and not allow any vehicles in that area.
That issue has been addressed then.
We did discuss that issue on my site visit.
Okay.
We don't have, or we haven't allowed fireworks in any other,
No, sir, I have not, in 12 years I've been here, I have not issued a fireworks permit for any event venue for a wedding or anything of that sort.
And a permit has to be issued for every event?
A fireworks permit does have to be issued by me for every fireworks event.
And if there were issues with not complying, then the permit would cease to be issued?
Correct. I would not issue the permit if conditions were such that it would not be safe. If they did not meet the minimum requirements in the fallout zone, if they tried to launch shells larger than is allowed, that permit would be denied, yes.
Would future permits be denied also on that, or if, once they came back?
It would be on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you.
We can go through the staff on each of the conditions and then create the motion based on the exceptions. That's how I would recommend we do it. So with staff and go through each one of the conditions. Is that Ms. Jackson?
Can we do that now?
Right, let's take our time with the motion.
Go ahead and do what you're saying.
Ms. Jackson, I'd like to make a motion, but I think I'll need some help with the CUP conditions. And staff, maybe we can bring up the exceptions. I believe it starts with number 9, according to my notes. And I would, I guess, first of all, should I go ahead and make the motion now and we go through? Is that okay, Ms. Jackson?
Yes.
So I'd like to make a motion that we approve, and then we can read the motion, I guess, at the end, with including CUP condition 9. I believe the next one is 10. Is that correct?
9 will change to what?
9 will change to the special, requiring the special event permit under county code.
A maximum of 500.
As presented,
We can add as with a maximum of 500. Thank you, Mr. Roccacherli.
Just for clarification, where are you making the 500 change? Because right now it says 299.
Right.
It's the one where it says 700 will go to 500.
Correct.
Is that in the next slide?
Let's,
Well, the recommended conditions don't say 700.
Correct.
Are you saying you want to have a maximum of 500 guests
per
present?
per the applicant's request, yes.
Okay, and you,
So 9 would be altered to, we would
Okay.
accept 9 as in is and add
so you want
up
to change the
500.
299 to 500
Correct.
and remove the language about the special event permit?
Yes. Commissioners?
Yes,
We're gonna read a maximum of 500
correct.
guests, and then we're gonna eliminate the review.
Ms. Sherry, jump in if you need.
It still has the limit of 299
Correct.
inside the building.
Correct.
That is
Yeah.
true.
Okay.
Yes. So they're still governed by the 299 interior. Let's take condition number 10, please.
It's gone.
And the applicant, yes, and condition number 10 would be removed to 150 events per year, over 80 attendees. Correct. With a limit on number or day of the week.
I'm sorry,
This is B, 10B?
correct.
Yes.
What about it? Sorry.
They wanted 80 instead of 50.
Correct. But overall, in their request was 150 events per year, over 80 guests. So it wouldn't read clearly as A, B, or C. Ms. Jackson, does that?
Yeah, I hear what
Makes
you're
sense.
saying. Or we could just leave A, events with fewer than 80 attendees shall be limited to 1 per day, and we could change B to events with 80 or more, primary event shall be limited to 150 per year? Or do you want to say the 3 per week, or just 150 per year?
I think it would be better to limit to 3 per week instead of saying we're really getting cloudy here. I mean, it's,
Well, how many, 3 per week? Yeah.
Can you put a slide up that had what they wanted to do?
They wanted to have 80 attendees, 1 per day, and they wanted to have 150 events at more than 150.
More than 80.
80.
150 primary events per year.
They didn't call them primary events. You just said 150 events at more than 50.
More than 80 versus the 50.
And limit that to 3 per week?
Correct,
And 150 per year?
correct.
Not to exceed, 150 per year, not to exceed
There-
3 per week?
Theirs was like 230 events per year, 80 plus 150.
Okay, this is what I'm hearing. We'll keep, for the event frequency, we would keep A and change it from 50 to 80.
Yes.
For B, we would say events with 80 or more attendees, let's get rid of primary event, I think, shall be limited to 3 per week, not to exceed 150 per year. And then I think we would get rid of C.
Is the applicant,
Yes.
Okay.
Tom here?
We
All
got-
right.
I think we got 10.
Condition number 11, please. And their request of the expanded hours
That reflects their
for
request.
the indoor only.
Right.
We're approving that, or recommending approval as
Yes.
is on 11. And we go to 13, please. Back up one. We had the amplified music,
13.
13. And,
And that reflects their request.
correct. All right, just want to make sure. And then 16, I believe, was the fireworks request.
I recommend we leave that as it is. I think once we let that house go to the barn, everybody's gonna want it. And I don't think we want to be involved in trying to regulate fireworks in the county.
Are we making a vote?
So I guess fireworks were shared with the community, is that correct, at the community meeting?
I mean, if the planning commission is so inclined, we did prepare some language. If the planning commission is inclined to support fireworks, we could share that to the commission if that's desirable.
I think if we let them do it, we'll have to let everybody else come in and apply for it.
Okay.
Here we are.
Right.
Tom, would you go over that, please?
If the planning commission were inclined, a condition could be added that fireworks may be allowed with approval of permit approved by the fire official and county administration, granted pursuant to section 670, and others of the Goochland County Code. And if so, the applicant must comply with all conditions of the permit. Shells shall be limited to a diameter of 1.62 inches. Furthermore, the commission can limit the number of times they have fireworks. Well, that's not here, that would be that might be an addendum to this.
Commission? Thoughts on that, giving it to the county to regulate outside of the CUP?
Say that again?
Giving the particulars to the county to regulate, they still have to get the permit, Mr. Davies. And have the
Right.
display of fireworks.
Yeah, but they're asking for 15-year approval when we haven't
Right.
seen the first fireworks show. It'd be kind of
I
hard to
think if
stomach
everybody else-
both of those.
I mean, we're gonna inundate the county with requests for fireworks. If we approve this, all these other events.
Are fireworks allowed in the county on private property?
I mean, they're allowed
Yes.
with a
With a permit.
fireworks permit.
Right. different than you or I wanting to have a fireworks show at our house. I mean, I'm okay with
Have
that,
you
but I
requests
don't,
for fireworks?
I mean, community development staff has not had requests for
I
fireworks.
think the Boy Scouts have done it before.
Have you had any requests for the fireworks?
Tom, it might be helpful to go back to your slide with the other event venues to see if that was a condition on there.
Yes.
Do you have any applications a year for fireworks?
We do get applications for fireworks. Generally, it's for 4th of July, high school graduations, it's special events, usually. We
This is a
do,
county property. County sponsors event.
not all of them, we do have some that are private, but, you know, they have to, it's not a cheap venture because they have to have a pyrotechnician that's certified by the state fire marshal's office. They have to meet all the criteria for fireworks. So it's not like it's pocket money to make something like that happen. For event venues like this, you know, Dover Hall, Adams School, any of those other venues, we have not issued any fireworks permits for those venues.
You have not.
Have not.
In your opinion, is this location safe to use pyrotechnics?
It's tight. It could be done, and we've discussed how to make that happen safely. But it is a tight location. I mean, I can say, yes, we can make it happen safely, but with fireworks, you know, you can't be 100% that every shoot's going to be perfect. I've seen failures in events. And so I can't sit here and tell you that, yes, every single time you light a firework off, it's going to be safe. It's going to be perfect.
Okay.
So what do you want to do? Want to leave it in? We'll leave it like it was prohibited?
I would say, yeah, amend provision.
I really like to see them be able to do it, but I don't want to not have a say on it for 15 years. I don't want to limit any business.
Right. Is there, staff, I guess the question would be, is there a way to exclude fireworks either being prohibited or permitted, and then in the conditional use permit? And I guess that would just be by, and then we would, I guess it really wouldn't be.
16
Thinking out
says
loud.
prohibited.
Yeah,
Just leave it like it
prohibited.
is.
Yeah, I think,
I'm sorry, you're talking about,
yeah, it muddies the water even further. I think we should, for the time being, I think it should be prohibited to have fireworks with all the other changes that we're granting. And
Board can change it.
The board, yeah,
Okay.
the board can certainly change it.
So you've got to approve as amended, right?
As amended with the
I'm
help
gonna have
of
to hear
the
that.
We got to
and-
16.
Well, sta-
We got to 16.
So far.
Can we go back to the
staff would offer one change to incorporate these changes into,
Can you go to 16, Tom?
Thank you, Ms. Jackson.
for their site plan, our standard language when we have a new application is that they shouldn't, like, in this case specifically, the capacity, they should not be allowed to expand their capacity above 299 until they get revised POD and any other permitting that is necessary to accommodate that number.
So you jump back to, did
It
we
would
jump
be-
back to 9? Can you go to 9, please? It sounds like you're
9?
addressing 9.
Yeah.
Okay. Was that the staff comment on,
Well, no, this is a new, I mean,
Okay.
this is a reflection of the increasing the capacity from
Right.
299 to 500. The old POD would not be valid. They would need to update that POD and any other permitting that is necessary to accommodate that larger number.
okay.
So we can add language with updated and approved POD.
Yeah,
So now we're back at 9. Can you go to number 9, please?
we're not asking to change the
They already changed it to 500.
correct.
But now you've said they wouldn't be able to operate, if I'm hearing you correctly, they wouldn't be able to hold an event.
Increase their capacity from 299 to 500 until their plan of development and any other permitting is approved to accommodate that higher capacity.
Even if it's outdoor?
I
Okay,
mean, as long as their capacity limit's 299, they could continue to operate. Because that's what their PUD is approved for.
right. But
And
the
they're building
planning
permits.
commission is making a motion to change it to 500.
Correct.
Okay, so it sounds like number 9,
Should be 500.
say a maximum of 500 guests may be present at any CUP activity, provided any event over 299 shall not occur until a revised POD is approved? Is that what
That's
staff
acceptable,
is
yeah.
recommending?
Thank you, Ms. Jackson.
Okay, can you please go to condition 19? Or- Thanks.
Yeah, I would recommend we stay with 10 for the time being, as the majority of the other facilities have, considering all of the other exceptions that have been presented.
I support that.
So it sounds like the motion is to approve as amended, and the amendments are only to condition 9, the limit on guests, to the 500, the condition we just read, provided events exceeding 299 guests shall not occur until a plan of development is approved. And then 10, event frequency will be how we read it earlier. There were no changes to the lighting that was addressed, or the fireworks, or the expiration.
Ms. Jackson, can I ask for some clarity, just real quick? The POD reference, you have that, I think Mr. Coleman was trying to amend condition 2 that says that they must comply to the existing POD. We were hoping to change the language to be until no additional, the amendments cannot be moved forward till a new POD has been, however we do it, the CUP activities cannot occur until a POD has been approved. Also, number 3 locks them in at 75 parking spaces with the increase in allowed guests by right. Then that would also probably need to be addressed through the POD. So I would say maybe strike 13, or, I mean, not 13.3, or somehow say that that needs to be increased. And we can work with the applicant between times to make sure that we're clear on what the ultimate thing would be. But as it stands now, they're only required to have 75 spaces.
I'm thinking. So for 3 and 4, conditions 3 and 4, I think what I'm hearing is they can proceed as they're operating now for events up to 299 people. So we'd probably have to add a second sentence to each. 3, I'm sorry, not 3 and 4, 2 and 3, conditions 2 and 3.
Until POD is approved to reflect the increase.
For events,
I think on 500, they don't even park.
well, they can only go up to 5. Right. So,
Yep.
so 2, site plan improvements for the CUP activity up to 299 guests shall conform to the site, but you're saying they'll get a whole new POD to cover, but they still need to keep operating how they are.
Correct. There's no intent to
right.
stop them from operating.
Any events exceeding 299 guests. Help me out.
Are you talking about for the parking?
I'm on number 2, like a second sentence to,
So some of the past, and I kind of was stumbling when I was saying it, but it basically can go back to just our standard that no CUP activities approved in addition to, or like as amended, or,
Exceeding
yeah.
299.
Yeah, maybe exceeding 299, because you're right, because that's what they're locked in.
POD is
Yes,
approved.
yes, that's
Okay,
good,
So that would be
perfect.
the
Number
first sentence
2.
would stay for activities up to 299. And then no CUP activity for guests exceeding 299 shall occur until, that's our standard, a new POD is approved.
POD
Okay.
and other permits.
Yeah, our standard one, which we don't have in full here. But they can keep operating as they are, but in order to go above 299, they have to have a new POD approved.
Yeah, well, for parking purposes, yeah, and anything else.
And I think we would add the same sentence to number 3. Yeah,
Yes.
right.
For number 3, you could say, you could add a sentence, or as approved with the revised plan of development.
Well, we say a
That's
minimum
good.
of 75, so it could stay a minimum of 75, but
It could be more.
the POD may.
That's a good point.
say, hey,
That is a good point.
Yeah.
It was more parking than the other facilities, but
And they said they contractually have people bust in.
Correct, and, this could be clarified between here and the board. We could actually
we can
work the
work that
numbers
out.
and,
Okay.
Yeah, if we capture the intent of the commission, we can
Okay.
wordsmith it. for the-
Sounds like we've got a motion here with amendments to condition 2 for the site plan, for a new site plan for events over 299, and we'll get that language added before this goes to the board. And for the limit on guests to increase to the 500, that was condition 9, and then for the event frequency on condition 10. Those 3 edits.
Would you like me to read the motion again?
I think we got it. Approved as amended.
Yes, so I recommend approval as amended. I move that the commission recommend approval of conditional use permit CU 2024-00001 for public assembly place at 2421 River Road West, subject to the imposed conditions with the following amendments that Mrs. Jackson mentioned, and we'll work with staff to clarify prior to the meeting of the board.
Second?
And
Second.
This is
All in
10
favor?
years.
Yes, 10 years to restate that, yes.
Second.
All right.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Thank you again, Ms. Jackson.
Approve with amendments.
The motion to recommend approval passes on a 5-0 vote. This case will be scheduled for public hearing before the Board of Supervisors on March 5th, 2024, with a recommendation of approval from the Planning Commission. This application will be heard on March 5th due to the status of the application when the Planning Commission meeting date changed. Our next public hearing item is in District 3, RZ 2024-1, application by Sydney and Sydney Developments LLC, requesting to rezone 55.414 acres from agricultural limited A2 to residential limited R1 with proffered conditions to allow for a residential subdivision at the intersection of Greenbrier Branch Drive and Glebe Road on tax map numbers 4326-1, 4326-2, 4326-3, 4326-4, 4326-5, and 4326-6. The comprehensive plan designates this area as single-family residential.
Thank you, Ms. Parker. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. For the record, my name is Ray Cash, Assistant Director of Community Development. As referenced, we do have a rezoning request before you for single-family residential development. The proposed zoning is for residential limited R1, which does, and then the comprehensive plan designates single-family residential. We'll talk about that in a moment. The vicinity map, as you can see, this is located generally close to where we are. I couldn't throw a rock that far, but it's pretty close. The Greenbrier Branch Drive is where it's located, and the aerial photos, you can see the area is generally undeveloped. There is a Glebe Road that does show to be there. It's an unimproved right-of-way. The current property is zoned A2. Generally around it is also similarly zoned properties of R1 and A2 residential uses. The updated comprehensive plan that came forward last year for the courthouse area, you end up with neighborhood residential that's located to the west. This area is now designated single-family residential and surrounding area. Then there's also the institutional uses of government facilities as well as J. Sargent Reynolds, or whatever, Reynolds College now. The comprehensive plan designate this area as single-family residential. That translates to a single-family detached uses at less than 2 units an acre. This proposal does provide for lots and density in compliance with the plan. There's another part of the plan that really recommends future trails within the environmental areas, generally the creek behind the existing old courthouse area along that creek line. The applicant has offered an easement to accommodate that and connections to their internal trail. Adjacent nearby property is generally the same as the subject property, and as I mentioned, except for the area that's on the other side of the creek, that's neighborhood residential. There was a community meeting held back in June of last year. Comments really provided related to impact on adjacent properties, impacts on roads, construction activity, land clearing, interest in what type of housing was offered, concern about public water, wastewater, and of course that impact on neighboring wells, the results. There is an on-site graves, so there was concern about protection of that, and estimated value of new homes. We have received 12 messages related to this case. Sitting comments are generally what we just talked about. There is concern, I would say the primary concern really comes from public water and wastewater and the impact on adjacent wells. As I'll talk about through the proffers, we'll address how some of the other concerns have been addressed. This is the conceptual plan. As you can see, there's Greenbrier Branch Drive up in this corner here. This property has been, it's been cleared up that this little triangle here doesn't really exist. There's been vacation, so the development company does have full access. Of course, Glebe Road. Glebe Road, as I mentioned, is sort of an existing right-of-way, unimproved, and so with the proposal, they will be building a full road with cul-de-sacs and the like. There is proposed here, generally the fire cistern that would be required anytime we have the development. Actually, it's up here, right? There's also, this is the grave site here. As proposed, they would also have the common area and a parking space that we typically ask for at any other type of case. It's a requirement. BMPs, there is the walking trail that's generally back here in the area that's really floodplain and areas with some slope. As you can see, that a lot of that open space is really encumbered for that type of feature. And then that's also makes an amenity that people could actually utilize for walking trails and the like. There is a key proffer that came forward with this. In the evaluation of this case, it would be that this increase in density did raise to a level that it would have warranted a turn lane on Fairgrounds Road. That has been proffered by the applicant, and that is a left turn lane, not a right turn lane. Only a left turn lane was warranted, and the applicant has proffered that improvement. So, as we've seen with a lot of cases recently, the applicant has proposed elevations so people get a good feel of what the houses look like or are proposed to look like. Has a little bit more meaning, of course, with this case because there is additional conditions that's related to that. So there is a minimum finished floor of 1,600 for 1 story, 1,900 for 2 story. There is a variation in design to prevent identical units side by side. So that's something we'd assess at the time of building permit. We would expect to see, okay, what do you have built here? What's built here? Colors, material variations, and things like that would be evaluated just to make sure you don't really have monotony in development. And that's pretty important, especially if you have a smaller neighborhood, you don't want everything to be the same. It makes it a little bit harder to mix it up sometimes in a smaller neighborhood, but it's an opportunity. There is roof materials and a provision that visible foundations should be brick, stone, or stone veneer. Otherwise, for the proffers, there is a provision that it's limited to the 20 lots you see there. This area is located on Greenbrier Branch Drive, which is really a one way in, one way out, local road. So it's subject to the limitations of a maximum of 49 lots. I think there's a total of 23 lots available. They are proposing to do 20 on their property, which is what staff would recommend fire as well. They proffered a conceptual plan. There is a provision for preservation of the cemetery on site, also the provision of access. And again, that's something that is looked for in every case. It's also a code requirement to provide preservation of such facilities. Left turn lane on Fairground Road, elevation as we mentioned. There is a construction hour limitation of 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Saturday. And then the applicant has offered the full cash proffer. I'll let the applicant kind of address a little bit of the potential, the water and sewer type of impacts. You're talking about something that the line would have to come from different areas. It also is concerned about easements that they're crossing. I know during the discussions and evaluation of this, there's also concern about, from the county's perspective, of running a line, you're only serving 20 lots, and the impact of that assessment as far as the quality of that line. And, if it's the line location and running of that, you'd also want to encourage it be run in a certain way that you encourage multiple users and the like. But I know there was discussion about the capacity as well for this type of bringing the lines down there. The applicant and the county did not move forward really to proceed to start doing those further evaluations on capacity and the like at this point. So staff is available for any questions, and I'll try my best.
What's the average lot size?
Oh, I can't remember, to tell you the truth. I think it's at least 2 acre, acre and a half, yeah. And so R1 requires it has to be at least over an acre and a half without having public utilities.
The last statement you made about the water, the county water being brought in to serve 20 houses, what quality, that would not be good.
Well, what you end up is you'd have a line at the end of a long run, and you'd only have limited use of that facility. So it's water that doesn't get turned over. It's not really a common issue that you can deal with. For that also, the evaluation, should that we actually get the water capacity, would also, the cistern would go away. We'd like to have the fire hydrant. So it's a lot of other type pressure things you have to consider when that occurs for that. But, it can be addressed. There's different ways you can run the water. There's different ways you sort of create a loop and things like this. Now Ray's starting to talk a little bit of his expertise here. But typically if you have a line, it's sort of at the end with not a lot of stirring. Especially as, let's say, 3 houses show up and it's another 2 or 3 years before when you have a development that occurs. So that's a consideration. That's not the only one, because there are other ways they can address that or encourage that you can add more properties to that through the process. And I've asked the applicant's representative to be available to answer any more questions about that as well, because they've had the conversations that I was not involved in fully. Yes, sir.
I'm not sure whether you see it or not. There is a plan to bring public water to the property.
No, there is not a plan for public water and sewer, right. Yeah, there have been discussions, but it never proceeded further beyond that.
So no water, no sewer.
Well, there's well and septic,
Yeah, well
so
and septic.
it's a different version. It's not the public kind.
Okay.
Any questions? No. Thank you.
I'll bring up their application. The applicant does have a presentation as well.
Afternoon. Thanks for having me. I'm with Sherm Homes. Might have to ask for a little grace. My colleague who was supposed to present had an unexpected death. So myself and our engineer are standing in for him. So we'll do the best we can on a short notice. See if I can figure out how to work this fancy thing. There we go. Sherm Homes has been around since 2001. We are a small to medium-sized builder. We're really good at that. We're in most of the surrounding counties. This is kind of in our wheelhouse, to kind of what we're talking about, a 20 to 40 lot neighborhood. So this fits right in with what we're doing. Greenbrier Estates, how do you get that little red thing there? There we go. So we're coming in on the section 2 down here. And then the back to the left side over there where you see the kind of dark yellow, that would be open space. Have no intentions on messing with any of that. That's going to stay the rural tree section over there. We're not going to do anything there. The path will actually be coming through that I'll show you in just a few moments. come back up here. So as he mentioned, total lot number is 20, lot size about 1.5 acres. In most all of our neighborhoods, we'd like to maintain that rural natural character. We have no desire to come in here and clear cut and just tear everything down. We want to keep it as the way it is now, the best we can. With the drain fields in the homes, we obviously have to put those in. But to the best of our ability, we want to leave it the way it is. The activate the open space and walking trails would be kind of up in this area where we talked about. And I'll show you more of that on a slide in a few moments. We, of course, will do whatever we need to do to give access to that, to deed, give easements, what have you. So when that comes through, we'll certainly be willing to work with them on that. Obviously, this is what he was just speaking about a moment ago. Let me go ahead to this slide. This is the one I was talking about. If you see kind of the green line, you all are very familiar with this, I'm sure, coming up. This would be the portion on our side here. No big surprise to anyone. I think the cool part about that we think at least, is that you could potentially walk from Reed Marsh all the way down on Main Street there up to Hickory, and on around and come up to the top side there without ever touching a roadway, which is kind of neat. But again, on this piece here, whatever's required of us, we would be more than willing to step in and offer easements and deeds on that parcel. And then, as was mentioned earlier, we all know that there's probably a little bit of stuff going on in the front up there on Fairground Road. We want to do our part if we're allowed to do that. We want to offer to widen that front section, and as was mentioned earlier, a left turn lane to come into that section, and potentially have the 3 lanes going up there along the front of the road. And then on the house sizes, this is some elevations. Typically, the price in this range for those houses would be $575 to $700. That could vary a little bit. And then, of course, according to the proffers that we have in there, to be the brick and different varying foundations, as he mentioned earlier. We have no desire for any home to be exactly the same next to each other. I want to make it kind of look unique. And so I guess we've got some questions.
There was some concern about a cemetery.
Yes.
Could you explain a little bit more about that?
Should I go? How do you go back? We gotta get one of these. And by the way, we don't have any fireworks coming up. Wow. God bless you. Let's see. I feel like I need some now, though. All right, come on. So there we go. Right in this section right here. There we go. You can tell I'm not the technology guy. Right here's the cemetery. There's some common area space there. We would have at least 1 or 2 parking spaces allotted for that. So you could park along the side there, and it's completely separate for that. And the HOA would be maintaining that going forward. There's going to be no change to that. We're not doing anything with it. It's going to stay exactly the way it is.
Perfect, thank you.
Yes, sir.
You all did look into bringing county water in there.
We did. That's probably a question for the engineer. We've looked into that a great deal, actually.
Yes, sir. Andrew Browning, Youngblood Tyler and Associates, represent the applicant. So, yeah, we had, initially, the plan was to bring public water and sewer. Sewer is across Courthouse Creek and Courthouse Commons in that subdivision. It runs along probably the floodplain on the outside of, or just outside the neighborhood. So we would have to bring that across Courthouse Creek, but currently it's within the open space of Courthouse Commons, and the developer of Courthouse Commons still owns the open space. So the HOA doesn't own it, the developer owns it. We'd have to get an easement from the developer, who would not work with us to give us an easement to connect it. So we could not get public sewer. Public water is in the north line of Fairgrounds Road, so up on top of the bank of Fairgrounds Road in that area is where the water line is located. We had discussions of bringing that into the site. County staff, I asked personally, was there enough capacity and pressure for this and the other subdivision on Fairgrounds Road that we're working on? We zoned, went for you guys prior, because we had some challenges with pressure and flow there. His response is he didn't know if it was enough capacity or pressure, and that they'd have to get with their engineer to determine that. But Utilities Department would prefer that we did not connect to public water, due to the length of the extension of the infrastructure for those few houses, it was a burden to the county to maintain and upkeep the water for those few houses. So they recommended we did not bring public water into the subdivision. The water comes all the way from the women's prison, comes up 6, goes down Fairgrounds, and down 522, back down Fairgrounds. So we're at the very end of the water. So as you get to the very end of the line, you start running out of pressure and capacity. And so this would be a extension of a longer end into this subdivision to another dead end. So that was, I think that is the concern. Maybe the only way to fix that would be to loop back into Courthouse Commons, and you'd have to get an easement and try to take it back across the creek, and it would be substantial infrastructure to do it.
If you had a loop like that, is that something that could benefit the other people in Greenbrier?
I mean, they could extend it further and, right, yeah, so that would probably greatly help the pressure, but you'd need to go through and cross Courthouse Creek, go under the creek and go back into Courthouse Commons and make a loop. We could give easements for that if the county ever wanted. I mean, that's gonna be a substantial cost and burden to try to do that. I don't know exactly how the county's model is on the water, but I would imagine that would help pressure in all of it to get that loop, at least the redundancy and water turnover, so it, the water's doesn't become stagnant in the lines as it does at some of the tail ends of the lines, and they have to flush it just to keep it, from becoming stagnant.
So from you all's standpoint, what you're presenting is what works economically for you all and for the county at this point.
Absolutely. We went to the county first, and that's the way, that's how it resolved initially. I think they were hoping to get more density here and have a denser product with water and sewer, and then, all these, as these issues came forward, this is where we landed. And so I think the proffers show 20 lots, but our conceptual plan is only 19 lots. That's really all we could get on there, and with what we have to, drain field and house sites. And so if you back into an average lot size, somebody asked that, I think it was 1.68 acres is what I just calculated, is the average lot size. But there are the minimum is 1.5. There are some lots that are, 1.5 acres.
Is the health department gonna have any issue permitting more wells in an area where they're saying wells are drying out? Obviously, we've received a bunch of emails.
Yeah, and that's always an issue, right? That's always any project that I have that comes up with wells, the issue of groundwater and wells drying up comes up. And quite honestly, it's a hard question to answer because I haven't found anybody that's been able to tell me how much water is down there. I spoke to a local well driller, I won't mention his name, and he's drilled wells here and in Clifton, and asked, did they have any issue with finding water? And he said, some wells are deeper than others, some are shallow, some are deep, some got more water, some got less water. I even asked him about finding, water and what they did, if they did anything special to try to, find aquifers. There is some practice you can do. They try to look for the fractures, and they use ground penetrating radar and other things to try to determine where there are voids in the rock. And where there are the void areas is typically where the water would be. So basically, to say, Mr. Well Driller, drill here, you're probably more likely to hit water. But even still, how much water is there? And it changes. Geology may change if there's a earthquake or something that changes, the rocks move, it changes the aquifer. So it's a tough thing to figure. Typically, 1.5 acre, 2 acre lot sizes is common. We've done a lot of in the areas that are that size with well and septic, and, as far as I know, they haven't had any issues, but I know that people drill wells and don't hit water or have issues with well water.
Mr. Brown,
Yes, sir.
there's a very, very good chance that houses in that close proximity to the neighboring houses are probably accessing the same aquifer.
That's correct.
One thing is for sure, the more people accessing that aquifer, the quicker the water's gonna run out.
I would agree with that.
No one knows when that's gonna happen.
Right, yes, sir, I would agree.
Yeah.
I would agree to that.
So I can see the neighbor's concern.
Right.
I have a question regarding the soil. I guess have there been preliminary soil tests performed?
We have done some preliminary soil work. I think it'll be a mix of some alternative and conventional systems in here. But, for this size, if we can't find a suitable site, when we go to design, then we don't get a lot. I mean, we have to have something that'll work for a septic system. We got to go to the health department, and if we can't get it approved, then they just won't be able to build on that lot.
Moot point, actually, because you can't get county water.
Yes, sir. I will say one other thing. I looked at the intersection. You can get on VDOT's site, and they have like crash data for all the different roads in the county. So I looked at the intersection of Greenbrier Branch, I think it is in Fairgrounds, and in the last 7 years, it showed 2 accidents. And one was a rear-end collision, and the other was a side swipe, both going in the same direction. So what that tells me is somebody's trying to turn left, and the car going by is running into them or hitting them going by. So that left turn lane will be an improvement to that intersection. It was also part of the Fairground Road study that was done, recommended that left turn lane, so I do think that will be a benefit to that entrance.
As the developer of the property, what kind of assurance can you give the lot owners that when the last guy builds and taps into his aquifer, that it doesn't, that he has water or that it doesn't hurt the other people in the subdivision? I mean, I know there's no guarantees, but still, this is not a due diligence or buy a beware sort of situation. I mean, you either got it or you don't have it.
So again, we wouldn't be able to have a lot if we didn't get a well, and so, I mean, I don't think you can make any insurance. I'm just speaking to my neighborhood where I live in Western Goochland, the lots are 20 acres, and, you know, some of the one I just drilled for my house drilled was 300 feet, and I got like 30 gallons a minute. I lived in the same neighborhood right next door, and I sold that house and moved in. That house, I was like 600 feet, and I had 2 gallons a minute. So it is, I don't know that as an insurance, you can make an exact science on that, unfortunately.
Yeah, I understand that, because my well is 30 feet from my neighbor's well, and I was there first, and we haven't had any problem. I got plenty of water, but I know there are areas in the county that people don't have water. It gets to be a real problem, and it gets to be a financial burden too. And I mean, your property is worthless if you don't have water.
Right, and there are separations now between wells and drain fields, and we have to look at the neighboring lots, you know, where the house will be placed and where the drain field is and where the well is. There's separations we have to meet and going forward with the design as well.
If I'm buying a $700,000 piece of property in a house, if I bought it and moved in and I don't have water.
I understand.
But he said he can't build on it if there's no water.
Right, if they can't find water and to meet the health department's requirement for the flow and what they need for the house, they won't be able to get an occupancy permit for it.
So you drill before you build?
I don't think they always do that. I didn't drill before I built my last house. I drilled afterwards and took a chance, you know what I mean? So, yeah, right, yeah,
You're pot committed at that point.
right. We were gonna keep drilling or keep going deeper.
Any more questions? All right,
Thank you.
we'll open it up for the public comment period. You have 3 minutes.
I can read the
And when
notes.
the light starts flashing, you need to close down your spiel.
You want me to read the notes, Mr. Charlie? Okay. So citizens are allowed 3 minutes to comment on public hearing items. When you do come to the front, you'll want to state your name and your address. When the green light comes on, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. When the yellow light comes on, you'll have 60 seconds remaining. And when the yellow light flashes continuously, you will have 30 seconds remaining. When the red light blinks, your time will be up.
Okay?
Come on up.
Don't rush.
My name is Warren Britz. I live at 2525 Bucknell Lane. Two of the
Please
lots,
speak into the mic, 'cause
two of the lots.
people at home are watching.
Oh, okay. Anyway, my name's Warren Britz. I live at 2525 Bucknell Lane. Two of the lots join onto my property. That's lot 4326030 and 4326040. And I questioned this at a zoning hearing about the elevations of the terrain on those lots. I've actually sent a thing in earlier in the week showing the elevations. If you look at these lots, it's all gullies and hills. This is where the road goes. It's a big ravine. It'll totally have to be filled and dirt moves, so I don't know how you preserve the forest and lots to put the road to get trees there. Plus, I have a holding pond on exhibit number 2, which is right here in the corner. This holding pond right here drains all the way through, which is where they plan on building homes. And when our subdivision was built, we are responsible as landowners to maintain this pond. Well, if they put a road here and cover that, how is the dirt going to seep out and maintain the proper water flow that's required by the county and me as a homeowner to provide? If you look at the hill going in the property, coming off of Glebe Road, at the total hill, these are 2-foot contour lines. It's straight up. I don't even think if you got off Glebe Road, you could walk up the hill. So there's going to be a lot of earth moving, a lot of trees cleared. I'm concerned about water flow, septic. You get rains like we've had January, December. Septic fields don't perk real well. You got 1.5 acre lots. It's going to be real tight to have water flow that's safe without it going into the streams. Thank you.
Thank you.
Come up.
My name is Susan Heckel. I live at 2525 Bucknell Lane as well. I want to speak to the cemetery. I wrote a letter regarding my concerns and factual information regarding that cemetery. There's only one headstone. It's Adelaide Morris. She was buried in 1924. The rest are only headstones, which are rocks, and footstones. I don't know how many individuals are in that graveyard, but you would not know that graveyard's there unless you know where it's located. And preserving it by having a bench and access is not what I'm looking for. I would like to propose that a 6-foot fence be placed around that so no one can enter it. I've seen on the south side of Richmond where a slave cemetery has been disrespected and stones have been removed. And these citizens belonged to Goochland County in 1872. And so you can read my letter if you have any questions, but I would like the builders to put a fence around it to protect it so that no one could get in it.
Is the perimeter of the cemetery clearly delineated?
No, it is
as you
not.
go?
It's not delineated.
You don't really know how the place.
I do. No, I do not. But I can take you and show you.
There may be others that don't have a headstone.
Hmm?
There may be others that don't have a headstone.
You're right. Some of them do not have footstones. It's sacred ground to me, and I think it needs to be protected.
It has to be left open for folks to visit.
No one has visited, I don't think. I have been in contact with descendants who do not know that the graveyard is there. But I know that the graveyard's there because we found it. And Goochland County knows the graveyard's there. But if you don't protect it, people will go in and be stomping on graves.
And that cemetery is on the applicant's land.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Reagan Davidson, 1895 Greenbrier Branch Drive. I am appreciative of the road improvements on Fairgrounds Road. I think they are great for this. However, I do construction for a living. This is how I make my living too, building houses. But as of the 4 years I've lived there, I've lost water. My well has gone dry 4 or 5 times. Most recently in the past month, where I had professionals come out and tell me I need to drill a $20,000 secondary well. I don't think that it is appropriate to come in and rob our existing resources to build more if the county is unable to provide the adequate resources, such as a water line, that's in the vicinity to cover this. which would also help with fire and rescue and all that as well. And I also don't think it's a good idea to have stormwater retention basins to store water for fire hydrants, for dry hydrants, because it'll increase the risk of public safety as well, kids playing in it, people getting hurt, as well as if you have a dry season, you're gonna have to find water to fill these basins, and which puts more truck traffic on the road of Greenbrier Branch. I was at the county, or the hearing, not hearing, or public comments or whatever, and there was also, I questioned the infrastructure of the current road because it is not set up to handle that kind of construction equipment right now. It will fail. I say this as a builder who has failed roads because of construction, so I see it. And they had no plan on reconstructing the existing road if it's damaged. But however, my main concern is the water, and I believe it would be irresponsible to allow the rezoning without the water line and robbing us of our resource that is already in limited supply. Thank you, guys.
Is your current well a bored well or a drilled well?
Drill.
It is a drilled well?
Yes. Yes. And it recovers at like a 1/4 inch per minute or something like that. So
What was the original gallon per minute on your well when it was first established?
I'm not sure because I bought the house. I'm a second or third owner on the house, so I don't know exactly. But, you know, when they sit there and throw $20,000 at a homeowner to start redrilling wells, I mean, that's, you know, second mortgage material there. That's big problems. Thanks, guys.
Hello, my name is Kaylee Bowens. I live at 923 Newsom Court. I live in the Village Hill community that butts up with the property. I'm here representing some of my neighbors on Newsom Court, and we do have some concerns about the development that's happening in the woods behind our house. Number one, just the fact that the trees and vegetation will be reduced will greatly increase the chances of floods. And right now, from the rain that we've had, my backyard already has puddles of water in it. My neighbor's yard has puddles of water. We pay for flood insurance in that area. And I'm very concerned that with the deforestation, we will have nothing to hold on to soil cover. If you look at the east side of Courthouse Creek, it is basically a swamp. If you walk behind my fence, you can get maybe 10 feet from my fence before you start sinking into the mud out there. And then on the west side of Courthouse Creek, as the other gentleman mentioned, it's a very steep terrain. Looking at the map from earlier, I'm really not sure how the county will be able to put their walking trail based on where the houses will be, because that area where the future walking trail is going to be, it's a mountain. I mean, you would get winded walking up it, so I'm concerned about how those plans will happen. In addition, with the water flow, if Courthouse Creek floods, all of that settlement will eventually make it to the James River, which we pull our water from. To speak to that gentleman's point, I live in Village Hill, and as far as I know, our neighborhood does own the water rights. The developer gave us the land back maybe a month ago, 2 months ago, I think it was in January. I'm also mentioned the traffic on Fairgrounds, and the fact that that area is wetlands. So I'm very passionate about nature and the animals, and what that to me is what Goochland makes Goochland. So we already have developments on the east and the west side of that property. That area is very small to begin with, and if we tear it out, we're just really hurting our green spaces in Goochland. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Robert O'Neill, and I live at 1844 Greenbrier Branch Drive. From the location where this building is being proposed, we're about a quarter of a mile to the east. My house is the only house that backed up to the Clifton subdivision that was built off of Maidens Road. And when they put in the Clifton subdivision, we had this very problem that we're talking about the aquifer being robbed of water or having septic issues. Immediately after Clifton was put in, we had to have about $10,000 worth of work done on our well system because we were pulling sediment into the well following the earthquake that we had out here in Goochland, if y'all remember that several years back. The fellow that lives behind me who drilled his well closer to mine has had to go back and have his septic redone 3 different times. He's got an engineered septic system pumping uphill to get his stuff to perk. Well, that's right behind us. I recall when I first moved out here in 2001, I believe we were outside of the village district area that was designated, and it was supposed to be 2 acres or more per lot. Now, this particular section is the Greenbrier Branch 2 section of the building, which was created and designated well before the village plan, I guess, even existed. But now it's been allowed to bring in a proposal with this developer for an acre and a half lots. So it was, I don't think that was ever intended when Greenbrier Branch was originally constructed, that there were going to be smaller lots than what's in Greenbrier Branch, the first phase where we live in it. So it sort of diminished. We were disappointed when we saw some of the sizes of the houses. I actually have the smallest house in the neighborhood, so y'all keep pulling those property values up. But the properties they're talking about building are 500 to 750 square feet less than the rest of the homes that are in the neighborhood, sometimes as much as 1,000 square feet less. So I'm glad I got mine when I got it, but I'd like to be able to stay there and have water for the rest of my time. And I'm concerned that I'm going to be like the gentleman just spoke again. I have to visit with the well guy again to get another well drilled if I lose water out of the back. And just don't lose sight of this. There was another piece of property that was boxed in by the proposed development in Clifton that was landlocked. And there was some, I guess, some proffers made and some deals cut to allow them to sell that, I guess, this 20-acre piece of landlocked land and put 5 or 6 more homes back in there. So that aquifer, everybody assumed that it was never going to be pulled from back in there by an additional 5 or 10 houses, but now we've got 5 or 10 that were already put in there, and we're asking for 20 more, and I'm just concerned that the existing homeowners are going to be at a deficit for water. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak?
Go ahead.
I want you to sit in the front right that way you can speed it up a little bit.
Hello, my name is Eugene Bryce. I live at 1896 Greenbrier Branch Drive. I have a lot of the same concerns as the rest of my neighbors with the water table. I also have ancestral ties to the actual cemetery that's on the lot. Great-grandparents actually purchased the property that is now Greenbrier Estates and eventually sold off some pieces of it. And I was fortunate enough to be able to move back into the neighborhood on some ancestral property and build a home and live in Goochland. What they're trying to do right now is going to affect us. The water table will change. We've had a lot of trouble with water in this neighborhood already. Adding 20 more homes is going to create a bigger problem. 20 more cars, more traffic, you name it. There's always a problem with traffic on this road. There's small children on this road. There's always people coming in and out that are non-residents already. So I don't see this problem getting any better. This will only get worse with the development plan that they have in place. As a resident, I am against the development for a number of different reasons. But my ancestral ties with the cemetery, I am concerned about how that's going to be protected. It dates back, as you mentioned, before headstones. So the few that you see that you're able to locate, that's the ones that you can find. How would you find the rest of them? Through excavation, through digging up, through disturbing the soil. it's no telling what you might find. That's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Scott McInnes. I live at 1874 Greenbrier Branch Drive. Know you all been here a while. I know you've been listening to us, so I'll keep my comments short, mainly because they echo what has already been said. I'm actually in a unique position because, as like Mr. Britz, I don't know where the slide is, but I am going to butt up to at least 3, possibly 4 of the proposed lots. I'll keep my comments specific to the well. I had to take my well over 600 feet to be a functional well. You put 3, 4, possibly even 5, depending on how that courtyard comes out. Where they're going to leach out, what that's going to do to my water, what that's going to put in my water, what that's going to put down into the water table. You know, and also too, you know, specific to the traffic, as Eugene said, you know, that road's getting busier and busier, but no homes are on it. I think this is only going to increase that traffic. I have 3 children on my own, all young, all want to get down on that road. And, you know, it's dangerous as it is. 20 more homes, I cannot imagine. Fairground roads, again, this 20 plus the 40 that's going in across the road up from the animal shelter. Reed Marsh 2 is already started. You know, there's that proposed massive development over on Scotts Lane. You know, I know VDOT keeps coming back, oh, Fairground can take it, Fairground can take it, but at some point, there's going to be a breaking point. And I don't think these 20 houses should be part of that. And again, I just want to reiterate what everybody else has already said. We have extreme concerns about our water. So I'll be left with nothing. So thank you for your time. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you.
Hello, Sean Sutton, 1864 Greenbrier Branch. Thanks for having us tonight. I'd like to comment on the well water as well. I purchased my home with 2 wells on the property. I was lucky. The first well, the original well, that pump is at 280 feet. It's a very poor performing well. Someone who owned a home prior to me dug a second well at 420 feet, and the pump in that one is at 380. Both of those wells will run dry. We do alternate them. It's just my wife and I. And any significant use on those wells, they will dry. Today, I switched them, but we do have ongoing water problems. I just want to just give you some specifics on my particular situation. Hope you take that into consideration.
Do you know approximately how many gallons per minute?
1.25 on the front well. That's the better well of the 2. The back well is poorer performing than that.
The 380
Correct.
is less than 1.2.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? We'll close the public comment period. Would the applicant like to respond to the comments?
Thank you, Andrew Browning again. I'll try to address, touch on some of the comments. The cemetery, we have not completed a boundary survey yet. We have pulled some research and some deeds and plats. It does show up platted on a plat that the cemetery is there. We know it's located there. We're going to have to determine the limits of that. You know, in other instances that I've come across this, we've done it in a couple different ways. We've had some guys come out with ground penetrating radar and they try to determine where it's been excavated in the past. We've had guys come out and like take a mini excavator and just skim off the layer of leaves and stuff, and you can tell where the soil has been disturbed. But we will have to determine where that cemetery will be, and we're going to commit to a proffer that we will put up a 4-foot ornamental fence around that cemetery. The one lady had some great information about who was buried there. You know, we maybe even get some information and put a name to it or something to name the cemetery. Again, it's going to be in common area. We'll have access to it from the road and some parking spaces. So there is some wetlands on site. Most of them are located along Courthouse Creek. None of the lots will be in the floodplain or the wetlands along Courthouse Creek. There are a couple of other drainage ditches. The one gentleman spoke, I think there's a permanent basin in the back of Clifton that drains through a channel that goes through this site. I think the way that we had it preliminary laid out, that kind of is in the front of some lots, so the driveways will have to cross that drainage way, or that they'll have a culvert to get to the house will be on the hill on the other side. So we're not gonna be able to fill in that channel. It'll be a channel there that I'm sure is probably jurisdictional by the Army Corps, so we may have to get some permits to put driveway culverts in, but we won't be able to go in and just blow out that whole stream. We won't be able to get a permit from the DEQ or Army Corps, or be able to pay the mitigation even if we were to get a permit for that. So we'll have to look at that. We'll also have to meet stormwater requirements for our site. Our preliminary plan or our conceptual plan showed a few areas where we were proposing stormwater basins. The way the rules are, you want to bring that back up, right? The way the rules are now, we would have to reduce the actual runoff that leaves the site today by 20%. So when we do our stormwater analysis and calculations, it'll actually be 20% less runoff coming off the site after development than it is now. That's the way the rules are written, and that's the requirements we have to meet through the plan of development. We don't want to put in 19 houses that don't have water either. So we want to commit to, we can extend the public water if it works. We can't afford to cross Courthouse Creek and make a loop back through the other neighborhood where we may need easements and, other things that are beyond their control. But I think we can extend the water to this site, provided the county will let us and it works. Guessing based off of the other stuff I know, if we can get pressure over the hill, it probably works. I mean, it's a pressure, you got a tank here, and so there's some elevation coming off, Greenbrier Branch and to get up over the hill in Glebe. If we can achieve that, we probably the pressures work. But again, so I think what we would like to do is we can commit to public water, but we're going to do a lot of calculations with the county between now and the board to make sure that it actually works and we can feasibly do it. Does that make sense?
Still would go to septic.
Still septic. We can't get to the sewer.
Right.
So it'd be public water and septic. And my guys, I was texting them while we're sitting here. We've done some preliminary stuff. It's decent soil. There may be a couple lots that'll be alternative, not conventional drain fields, but most of the soils are decent enough for conventional systems.
Someone had mentioned the topography, it was very difficult and.
So it's no different in my opinion than the other section of Greenbrier or some of the Clifton. It's exaggerated on paper. It looks worse. It's not as steep as Royal Hill, you know what I mean? And so, but it's similar to the other sections of Greenbrier. And, some lots will be basement lots and, we'll have to work with it, but it is some topography, I would agree.
So as the applicant, I guess you're saying that you're proffering, I guess, a left turn
Ray,
lane
help me.
and public water.
Yes, we can add a proffer for public water, and like I said, I guess we're gonna work really hard between now and the board to make sure that we can really achieve that.
Yeah, so I guess at this point, what we had talked about, if the applicant agrees, is we'd add a new proffer 14 that would require the provision, to say the lot shall be served by public water. And then that way, that would be going forward to the board. If it can't work out between now and then, that's, the proffer would already be your recommendation that it be served by public water. The other condition would be for the cemetery. I guess the wording just I'd have to work a little bit, but off-street parking for the cemetery shall be provided, and a 4-foot ornamental fence be provided around the cemetery, perimeter of the cemetery.
It sounds like Mr. Bryce might be the best one to work with.
Absolutely. He may be helpful to show us some limits of it.
Does that work, Callie?
Yeah. Go ahead. Ms. Jackson.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, provided and maintained.
Provided.
Maintained by the HOA, yep.
Are we saying we're not doing wells at all now?
That's correct.
That's our intention, is to do public water.
I think the two developments that come to mind, well, the topologies somewhat difficult, and, you know, you can't fix things after the fact. I think of Creekmore sometimes, you know, because
Right.
they have a significant amount of water. It's, you know, I'm sure the neighborhood wishes it was Creek less instead of Creekmore. And then the other one that comes to mind is there was a neighborhood or an area within Crozier where the county had to step in and provide water because of contamination and no water.
Right.
Or not good water. So the left-hand turn lane is I see that almost needed as the neighborhood exists today. And then the most common theme here is the water issue amongst everybody that has spoken. So those are my comments.
Any other
Any
comments?
questions for me? I'll sit in. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think they've addressed the concerns that on the emails we've gotten, which is better than we normally get. I move that the commission recommend approval of rezoning RZ 2024-00001 for 55.414 acres on tax maps numbers 43-26-0-1-0, 43-26-0-2-0, 43-26-0-3-0, 4326-0-4-0, 43-26-0-5-0, and 4326-0-6-0 from agricultural limited A2 to residential limited R1 with proffered conditions. This is as amended, right? As amended.
Yes, sir, and just for clarity, because the applicant amended its proffers, there will be an amendment to the cemetery to add the 4-foot ornamental fence, that's proffer number 8, will be installed and maintained around the perimeter of the cemetery, and a new proffer number 14, all lots shall be served by public water.
I'll second that.
Been moved and seconded, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
The motion to recommend approval passes on a 5-0 vote. This case will be scheduled for public hearing before the Board of Supervisors on April 16th, 2024, with a recommendation of approval as amended from the Planning Commission. Our final item tonight is countywide ZOA 2023.
They're having a discussion and
Take that to the hallway.
I can't talk about it now, we have a copy of certified, it's probably the vacation plan you're talking about.
We're gonna take a 2-minute recess so that everybody get reorganized.
10 minutes? 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
sections 15, 233, 243, 253, 264, and 273, district standards, to remove maximum floor area ratio FAR, requirements in the business neighborhood BN, business general B1, commercial interchange B3, industrial limited M1, and industrial general M2 zoning districts.
Thank you, Ms. Barker. Again, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, for the record, my name is Ray Cash, Assistant Director of Community Development. This is an applicant-initiated ordinance amendment that's coming before you as referenced. The proposal is to remove the maximum floor area ratio from the following districts. We're talking about business BN, which currently has an FAR of 0.25, business general B1, commercial interchange district, which is B3, industrial limit M1, and industrial general M2. Does not impact the plan development park maximum FAR for multifamily that's located inside of M1, which really was the basis of West Creek. It also would not remove the FAR requirement for MPUD and RPUD. They do have a ratio for commercial uses on a lot, and they're not affected by this amendment. Staff has received 2 emails in opposition. Comments include impact of change on areas adjacent to B1 and Parkside Village, impact on the rural character, concern of the need of changes for developer-driven, not versus economic development, concern for unintended consequences of the change for evaluation. So what is floor area ratio? It's really a tool that we'll talk about as we move forward. It's determined by dividing the gross floor area of a structure by the area of the lot. Now, different localities have different definitions of how you determine what's sort of deducted from consideration of gross floor area. Ours currently talks about it should be the inside perimeter, but you exclude vent shafts, courts, and things like that. You know, the intent is really to imagine the footprint of what of that house or that building to move forward, and then there's a formula by which you determine FAR. So, again, what's the purpose of floor area ratio? Well, it can be a zoning tool that's utilized in regulating the size of buildings on an individual lot. Typically, it's utilized in really broader planning goals for special districts or areas where you anticipate, regulate, and also encourage, in certain circumstances, the bulk of developable density. So it's typically not standard in Euclidean zoning, which we experience here, which is your standard zoning of separation between uses and different use types. It's more often it's in form-based codes, incentive zoning, or performance zoning, or areas we have a specific development code for a specific area, usually intended for higher density development. So a minimum FAR is often used to encourage development to be at a certain stage. And why do that? Well, for these areas that they're utilized in typically is not broader zoning districts across the county or in rural or suburban areas. Typically, FAR comes in as an area there's been heavy investment by a locality, or an area this is where you anticipate or encourage growth. And so an FAR usually comes in at a stage where you say there's a minimum FAR that's expected. As we talk about a couple of localities as we move forward, we'll show that. So really it's intended to concentrate growth in your growth development areas. For instance, where MPUD or RPUD are, those are designated areas where you have growth. This is straight out of our ordinance. It's really the figures that used in the ordinance. It really describes or shows how you determine FAR. You know, that's intended to be the building here, the 1.5 acre lot. If you do the calculations of the building divided by acreage a lot, you get a 0.4 FAR. Same scenario would work if you did 2 stories, as long as it's the same building footprint, and you come forward and you get a 0.4 FAR. And so you see the little figures there. And I never like these FAR determinations or figures because they always show it's just sliding forward, sliding back on the lot, as you see there in the lower corner. That doesn't match the reality of what most Euclidean or standard bulk zoning does. So as a standalone tool, let's say we didn't have the setbacks or anything or buildings, heights or things like that. A standalone FAR encourages, it can restrict or encourage, depending on how you use it, the density on a property. Its usefulness as a tool is really based upon what other regulations you have. So having an FAR of 2 in this picture here in red, well, it's supposed to be red, I'll make it red, circling around a couple times, of having an FAR of 2 and no other regulation basically leads to the building takes up the whole lot. It can go base because you're just trying to you don't have other concerns or requirements. And that's what often happens when you're talking about heavy urban environments or areas where you go, hey, let's just put on what we want. If you have an FAR of 2 and you have like an open space or a large setback frontage type of requirement, you lead to the blue scenario. So again, the concept is with FAR, it encourages upward movement of there. A lower FAR typically, it can be a lower density. The benefit in certain environments with the higher FAR is not just the return of density or investment for the area. It also is you encourage elevation. And so if you encourage elevation, you have the opportunities for open space and other types of things that come forward. So floor area ratio is how we regulate here in Goochland. In addition to the FAR, we have what's very traditional and what's in most ordinances outside of those specialized districts is you cover location and coverage of the lot through things like setbacks, which is the red arrows here, buffers, which would be the green arrow that usually happens anytime we're adjacent to residential properties, and on-site parking, which is yellow. And when you're talking about a suburban locality, a rural locality like we are, parking becomes the driving force between what can really go on a property. We have very suburban rules for parking here, and so that type of parking takes up a lot of space on the lot between the parking and drives and entrances, plus our other setbacks and buffers. We also have a building height limitation here. You're talking anywhere 35 feet in our lighter commercial districts. You can have the ability to go up to, I think it's 80 and then 100 in the industrial districts, and B3, that's our property that's designated around the interchanges, and specifically at 288 and 64 in Oilville, those can go up to 100 because those properties were determined to be, those are the areas where we expect hotels and things to come. There's also provision in certain those districts, you can have greater heights if you move the setbacks around. So in other words, we have the regulations in place that manages the relationship to other lots and how the building's located on a lot. So staff, we're aware of this and researched things over the years, but this is something we were asked to do, is to perform another benchmarking exercise just to look and see, are people using FAR? So Cumberland, Louisa, who are rural localities as well, Henrico and Chesterfield, none of those do. Powhatan does have it referenced in their ordinance, but it only talks about seeing it on a plan. It doesn't give you a minimum, maximum, or any type of standards related to that. Fluvanna does use that, but they use it as a minimum point FAR, only in their PUDs, and it's a 0.4 commercial FAR. So what our current FAR for B1, that's their minimum for their intense district, which is their intended urbanized development districts. City of Richmond, like most large urban localities, so mostly cities, also some of the larger intense places, a little bit like Fairfax and things, have these FARs that they use in certain districts. So Richmond has 4 of them. For instance, the B4 as we reference here is a commercial, is a B4 commercial. Residential is the only thing that has an FAR regulation, and that's 6, not 0.4, not 0.6, it's 6. And none for commercial. And again, so that's how the tools are utilized, is that you use FAR where you think you need that to encourage types of development. And so that's why we preserved it in the MPUD and RPD, so those could be evaluated as we look forward to, working on those codes in the future, coming out of the courthouse, we know we need to evaluate, and we'd also, if we did Centerville coming forward, evaluate those, so that FAR is utilized as a tool in those, because those districts do not have standard setbacks. Those are not part of that. That's something that works out as you do the plan development process. For instance, in our PED, that's why we have the small lots there, because we don't have limitations on setbacks. All right. the applicant that's going to be coming for you, Kerry Hutcherson, acknowledged that he has been part of, Extra Attic, which is the case that came back a year and a half ago, before this body was approved. And part of that development was approved as an overall package, a project. And so what's here is you have the buffers around the side. We had all these agreements of sidewalks and improvements, and this is a case that was well negotiated with the community, and to work this out. So as you calculate the full spaces, this is a 3-story building here, which is the storage building. Between that, calculations come out, run the whole formula, you come down, it's a 0.399, so a 0.4, collectively FAR. So all these things that we have here on this lot is things we look for. We have the required parking that's necessary for it. We have setbacks. We have buffers that are important along a road that goes inside of a neighborhood. We also have the protections on the side of environmental as well as buffers. And so it met the point, under the 0.4 because this is the zoning district for that. So what ends up happening is the applicant recognizing that when you're in a project type thing, not everybody wants to be a leasing or condo or whatever. Certain corporates, certain individuals want to own the property for that. We view it as a project that for its, make sure you have the access connections, they have a shared access here. We have an overriding zoning case that causes and that regulates the conditions and enforcement. So if the client wants to subdivide here, each of these individual parcels have to meet 0.4, okay? And so when I did this, they were nice enough to send me what their thoughts were at one point, and I did some quick 5:30 in the evening type of math. So you come out with the storage use itself, which would be the center parcel, comes about 0.76. The office use comes down to 0.08, that's here at the back. So that's got a lot of the like the wet areas and things like that. And then the retail use up on the road, that's a 0.15. So 2 of the 3 users exceed the FAR based upon our current conditions. However, nothing's different with these than what the original project was. We still accomplished the goal through our ordinance. Each of those will have to accommodate setbacks. When you do the property division, there are certain consequences that you have to do to include meeting our existing standards for each of the zoning district. And, it's, we understand the goal of what FAR is intended to do. And when staff, and to be honest, when the applicant came forward and said, we'd like to remove B1, the FAR from the B1, they said, it would be inconsistent for us to remove it from one base district and not do it in all districts. So we requested that they amend their application to cover the districts that we've talked about, which are base commercial and industrial districts. To accomplish that, so that there wasn't one clear distinction. There was nothing different to the B1 FAR as there was to the other areas as far as impact, setbacks, and requirements. So really, I've gone through a lot there. FAR is something that you don't really come across every day. We have had incidents where it's come forward and we've had discussion with people. It impacts what their potential investment would be or their interest in coming here. I would say that we have talked to our Economic Development Department. They would support this amendment as well, for that or some form of that you may consider. I know the applicant does have a presentation, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
How long have y'all been using FAR?
So it was in place when I got here. This is the 2020 ordinance amendment came into place. And so we don't know the origin of it. I suspect potentially if when part of the RPD and MPD made you think that FAR is there. It has its role. It's just, we haven't seen it as comparable.
Problems with it up until now?
The only thing we've had problems with was this now. We have had conversations with people, their initial bluffs, what they'd like to propose. And we said, we got the FAR. We've had people close that you've had to buy a little piece or cut a little piece back of the development. And we have had economic development prospects in the early stages have the issue with that. Doesn't mean that's the only reason that it fell through. There could have been other things that we worked out and stuff, but it has been noticed that in certain conversations that it's affected that. Doesn't mean that, I'm not to say that we couldn't have worked out some other scenario with them, additional locations or things like that.
So going back to your first slide that showed the piece of property as one piece, is that the way you generally would review it?
So like for this here?
Yeah.
Yeah. When it comes into zoning, that's what we're evaluating. And this one happened to be, I think, one piece at time of zoning for that. This, because originally that had been a shopping center zoning, if y'all recall, for that. And so, there's a way to evaluate it. I will say honestly, when I first had looked at this and we had a conversation about it, I'm like, oh, that's no big deal. Because I kind of looked at it as the project, okay? But that's not what our ordinance says. And so ordinance looks at it in the variation of the individual parcel. And so that's what makes a distinction is when you break down that property. And that's part of when you have to often see FARs, it's not really related to the property. It's in this mixed-use district, there should be a minimum or a maximum of this FAR. And so that way you have flexibility with individual sites. And so when you have individual pieces, I guess the meaning starts to disappear. Because collectively, the site's under 0.4. And so as an original piece, but it's really the way the ordinance is just set up. It doesn't look at it as an overall project.
Well, it sounds like to me it's more of a problem with the way the ordinance is set up than with FAR, because this would need it. So we're trying to address a problem that doesn't exist if you did it this way.
Yeah, right, well, right. The ordinance goes by an individual property as 0.4. So then it comes down to, there's always considerations about different ways you could break that down. Part of that could be, if we don't go forward with this, maybe you can evaluate that you look at an individual zoning case. That gets a little complicated because changing pieces come and go, people rezone and things like that. But that's the way to look at it too, is what's considered a project or what's considered zoning. So there's different ways to break that down. It's a little bit easier when you have like a plan development or a CU master plan. When you have something that's not really a master plan, it gets a little complicated.
So we're sort of addressing a problem that doesn't exist, with the exception of this one particular project.
I would say that it happens for this one now. We do recognize the potential for impact in areas, especially in the eastern part of the county where we have the economic development parcels as we come forward, and then industrial is another area of kind of larger concern because we've seen more interest in taller and bigger uses on the
Couldn't the
M1.
applicant come in, in other words, if you can't take this, if you take it the way your second development plan looks, as an exception, and do it on a exception basis, rather than doing all of them in the countywide. I mean, my concern is if you change it countywide, it's one of those things where I don't know what I don't know. And if you just allow them to come in just like we have conditional use permits, let them come in and say, hey, the whole development meets this, but this little piece over here doesn't.
Right.
Get us an exception.
So currently, the ordinance doesn't allow us to make that amendment. It's not one of the things that's set up for either administratively or for the board consideration, especially if you're doing a straight rezoning. It's not one of the things that's the ability. It would be one of those things, you would have to basically make it a conditional use, except that you could be asking for development requirement of reduction of FAR. So we'd have to amend the zoning ordinance to allow for that.
To allow conditional use.
Yeah, I think part of the process is that I'd have to think of different ways to do it. You could make it as that you'd have to request the exception to the FAR. Doesn't necessarily be a conditional use, but it would be this exception request, and it's something we'd have to sort of back our way into it. And then it comes down to discussion is, do we need to develop criteria about when it's appropriate or whatever. So I mean, that's, again, that's an option to explore for that. And I think the applicant, of course, they understand there's different ways to take a bite at the apple or try to fix this. So, I guess other questions?
I'm not sure what requirements FAR could satisfy that wouldn't be taken care of by setbacks and building height.
I will say that was a little bit of staff's perspective, is that we've already sort of addressed what we thought the concern, which is traditional concerns. You don't want it too close to your neighbor. You don't want it too tall. And that's traditionally what every time we have these meetings, that's what we discuss. You know, it doesn't come up to question the FAR until it's a problem. And because really when we come across something unique, it's because setbacks and building height are really, in most traditional zoning that I've been through, just, suburban zoning, you get a little different when you get into intense interior urban areas or something. But yeah, those are the most things that our code's designed to address, and our peer codes, our peer localities, their codes are set up to address. I don't want to be too close to my neighbor, or I don't like that, that use too close to me. And so I believe our ordinances are really set up in that area to focus on those type of things. So, and FAR is a little unique, and that's why you don't know about it until it's in your face. It has its purpose. It just doesn't seem that we've been utilizing it that way. All right. Now the real applicant. So now the other applicant, if that's okay. What would you like to have?
Can we just start there?
Sure.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. I'm Kerry Hutcherson. I'm the applicant. I'm a land use attorney. I also have a master's in land use planning. So I know a little about this stuff. I've been doing it for my whole career, nearly 20 years. I do have a client, the developer for this extra attic development, who would be interested in this, but through conversations with staff, I decided I would be the applicant because I could see the benefit to the county in general for something like this, as well as certainly I will at some point have other clients who will be interested in this, and it just seemed like the more we talked with staff, I say we because Andrew Browning with Youngblood Tyler has also been involved with this project. The more we talked with staff, it just seemed like this was a good opportunity to help Goochland try to get more in step with its peers. As Mr. Cash was explaining, you can see Goochland's really an outlier in the way that it has used this floor area ratio tool in its zoning ordinance. And as we were working through this specific development for the extra attic development, it came to light that the way that the Goochland staff were applying the floor area ratio requirement on a per parcel basis rather than a project as a whole was going to create problems not just for this specific development, but other developments, particularly the commercial and industrial developments that are really more on this like suburban or exurban scale. And I think probably everyone in the room would agree with me that Goochland doesn't want to become super urban. That's part of its identity, is it's still a rural county for the most part. So the floor area ratio tool, as Mr. Cash has explained, most of the time when we see it, it's used in highly dense developments. And for the type of project we have here, where you have, there's enough land where you can do a multi-user but not large-scale commercial development. Applying the floor area ratio requirement on a per parcel basis really makes it tough for the project to be feasible. This is because the developer usually comes in either acquiring one single tract of land like this one, or several tracts of land and consolidates them and says, okay, this is my zoning case. I want to put together this piece of land. I'm going to rezone it, and we're going to master plan it. We'll proffer a concept plan, just like what was done in this case. We're going to master plan it, and we're going to have our first primary identified end user that'll be an anchor. So in this case, it was the self-storage user. And that one's typically going to be the user that's going to require the most space. It's going to be the biggest attractor. And then there will be secondary users that'll come in later as the development starts to generate some interest from customers. And often as the life of that development progresses, folks who are interested in buying into that development say, well, I'd like to buy my own parcel here and own that separately. I don't want to be a tenant of a shopping center. I don't want to participate in a commercial condo structure. These days we find that commercial developments, a lot of times for the end users and for lenders, the commercial condo structure doesn't work real well for folks. The tenant-landlord situation doesn't work real well. People a lot of times want to own their own parcel in a commercial development. If we were to do that here, as Mr. Cash showed you, we wouldn't be able to have a development that could work if you applied that floor area ratio requirement on a per parcel basis. So that's where the original conversation started. And Andrew Browning and I, our first suggestion was, well, let's be surgical about this and take a baby step. We'll just apply it to the B1 zoning district because that's the one we have here. And let's just change the ordinance so that it specifies that floor area ratio is applied on a per project basis, where the project is defined by whatever you have in your master plan that's approved at time of zoning. So that helped because then everybody at time of zoning would know this is the project, this is what's going to be included, and this is the general concept plan that we have. We liked that moving forward. The staff liked it as well, but the more they thought about it, they said, well, maybe we don't really even need to have the floor area ratio requirement in these zoning districts at all. It's really only serving a useful purpose and doing more than setbacks, parking requirements, buffers, building heights, restrictions that are already in these zoning ordinance sections would do on their own. The FAR is really only adding value in the RPUD and the MPUD districts. So that's why we changed it. Again, Mr. Cash told you, they asked me to do this. I changed the application so that it would be a removal of the FAR requirement from all the non-residential zoning districts other than that the RPUD and MPUD districts. And so that's sort of the long history of how we got to here, and I appreciate your time in listening to that explanation. I know this is kind of a mysterious subject for a lot of people, and so I'm sure there are lots of questions still. I think this commission has just asked a lot of really great questions of Mr. Cash, and I think his answers were very helpful. Maybe another point just to emphasize, and Mr. Cash started talking about this, but setbacks and parking requirements really do a ton in terms of dictating what goes into a development like this. For example, if you look at the parking that is grouped generally with these three buildings, you got the fewest parking spaces next to the storage use. And that should make sense for most people, right? You don't need a whole lot of parking for that because people are going to come in there one time, store their stuff, and then go away. They're not going to come back to that storage unit very often. Whereas for the office, well, there are people coming in and out of there every day. They need more parking. Retail, same thing. If we didn't have the ability to master plan this site and allocate the parking in those ways and then leave more room in the instance of the, hold on a second, let me show you with these, oops, I might have messed this up. I was looking for the example where we have, here we go. The planned parcel division lines here. But if we were to have, to apply this FAR requirement to say the parcel in the middle there with that storage facility on it, it doesn't need a whole bunch of parking. But if we have to reduce that floor area to meet the FAR requirement, now that parcel is just a whole bunch of wasted space. That could be used for parking on the other places that really need it. So you can kind of see how the existing restrictions, Mr. Myers had a really good question. What about those existing restrictions other than FAR isn't doing enough to achieve the type of development that the county wants? And I think Mr. Cash basically said, well, except for in the RPUD and MPUD districts, it really isn't doing anything for us. So I hope that helps explain things a little bit more and also explains my involvement in this. And I know this is kind of unusual. It's not too often that a countywide zoning ordinance like this gets brought forward by private applicant and not the county itself. But this explains some of the background. It really came out of just conversation with staff, and the more we got talking with it, the staff said they really supported this and wanted us to bring it forward. So here we are, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have. And Andrew Browning's here as well. I'm sure he can get into the nitty-gritty on design stuff for civil engineering that I can't handle.
We might need your help.
If this is approved in these other zoning districts, is there a disadvantage to it? Or
I really think because of, I don't think there's a disadvantage in the sense that the other restrictions that have so much control over how a development can be laid out, like parking requirements, setbacks, building height, all of that, they're not going away. So removing FAR in this case isn't going to affect that. And really, I think, now Andrew could probably speak to this better than I could, but I don't think that there's anything that removing FAR from something like this concept plan would do that would change any of the way the layout was dictated. This layout is the way it is because of all the other requirements you have to meet in this county. And it also was site specific too, of course. Look at the properties nearby and all the different entrances and how they line up, that sort of thing. Of course, those things will dictate how the layout has to go as well. So, FAR really, I don't think it came into consideration with this development until very late in the process. And I think Mr. Cash could probably confirm. Yeah, after the process, this thing was all master planned without anybody ever even considering, does it meet FAR? That's kind of the reason why we're talking about it now.
exactly where is this site?
It is on Pounce Tract, over next to Berea Baptist Church, that area, and if you know, yeah, Parkside Village. Mm-hmm. What was the name of that? It's 7-Eleven now, but used to be called. Yeah, All Shucks. All Shucks. I missed that place when it was All Shucks. So anyway, that's the area. I live down the road in Hanover from here, so I drive by it all the time.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'll open it up for public comment period. One at a time.
One at a time. I'm one. Larry Barker, 2170 Mannequin Road. I'm ceding my time to Rob here.
Linda Moore, 2164 Prophet Road. I'm ceding my time to Rob.
Good evening. I'm Betty Knuckles, and I live at 2140 Mannequin Road, and I'm ceding my time to Mr. Williamson.
Michelle Williamson, 2262 Wheatlands Drive, ceding my time to him, even though I am the better half.
That's not the case here.
Before we go, are we restricted on the amount of 10 minutes? 10 minutes, right?
Okay, good. Thank you. My name is Rob Williams, and I live at 2262 Wheatlands Drive, Mannequin, Sabot. Have you ever walked up to your toolbox, noticed a special tool, thought that sometimes I don't need this, and you throw it in the trash because you haven't used it in a while? I'll bet not. Keep that in the back of your minds while we discuss this issue. Now, why are we here? If I was the salesman I'd have said everything he said. But I look at it from a different perspective. Goochland is different, trying to maintain rural heritage, et cetera. This zoning change looks like an economic development initiative, but I don't see where economic development has lost many valuable commercial projects because of floor area ratio. In the recent Board of Supervisors retreat, listed many challenges to economic development. The floor area ratio was not one of them. Let's concentrate on the ones that were listed. Or is it because the planning department has been swapped with too many commercial rezonings where floor area ratio has been a deal breaker and wasted valuable time? That's not the case. Or is it because there's one developer with one property with one specific issue of their own making, and most likely will not occur again in another project because a mistake was made? Now that's a bingo. That's why we're here. The irony here is floor area ratio was not an issue in the rezoning or the conceptual plan. As you saw, it's 3.99. Floor area ratio was not an issue for the mini storage. That was approved too. The proposed amendment is not in proportion with the size of the problem, okay? Because the remedy to this issue that he has looks like an economic development initiative, and they don't match. The problem is the developer needs to carve out a mini storage, will need a new zoning action to divide the lot, so the mini storage operator can buy a carved out piece, vice leasing it. That should have been known in advance. They should not get to this point in the project and realize that the mini storage wants to own the property. That should have been from the beginning. Planning rules dictate there are only two remedies in this case, a variance or an ordinance amendment, and he doesn't qualify for a variance. You can't get a variance when you've created the problem and you'll gain by financial benefit getting a variance. But tonight they're asking to get that relief via an amendment. That sets a bad precedent, in my opinion. This approach will be risky and costly to the county as a whole in the long run. It opens a Pandora's box of future issues, if you haven't recognized that by now. The unintended consequences could potentially affect commercial zoning in Haydensville, George's Tavern, Vice Crossroads, Sandy Hook, Crozier, Oilville. It'll definitely impact District 2, 4, and 5 because they have water and sewer. Now, I'm not saying the developer doesn't deserve to pursue a remedy in his dilemma, but trashing a tool like floor area ratio in all business and commercial ordinances county-wide is excessive overkill and unwise. The most obvious remedy would be costly to the developer, and that is reduce the scope of the plan, carve out enough land, and satisfy the floor area ratio for the tenant that he plans to have. To help alleviate this hardship, the county is trying to offer what they think is a mutually beneficial remedy of removing FAR as logical and reasonable. But in Goochland's case, that is not true. We're unique. We're not like Fluvanna, who has a minimum trying to get urbanization in a certain commercial zone. Floor area ratio is basically simple, but often misunderstood. Ordinance limits are development standards like height, buffer, setbacks, parking, and floor area ratio. Zoning 101 states development standards are measurable. You either meet them or you don't, and you know that going into a project. Development standards are there to protect public safety and protect natural features, like our rural character. Now, it's been said tonight that we already have regulations to control the size of buildings. We have height limits on how tall, buffers, setbacks, and parking will dictate how big a footprint you'll actually end up with. And in the summary and in the presentation, floor area ratio is said to be redundant and therefore unnecessary. I disagree. We have the northeast quadrant, which is going to be heavily industrial. Designated growth area is going to be affected. And I'll just leave it at those two items, in addition to the other areas I've mentioned in the county. Floor area ratio controls the size of buildings is true, but more importantly, floor area ratio ensures the bulk density inside the buildings are in proportion with the lot, the area, and in proportion with the county as a whole. Height limits how tall, but fails to limit how much is inside. Remember, height in B3 is 100 feet. M1 and 2 is 60 and 80 feet, depending on fire protection. That potentially is a lot of multi-levels on the insides of those buildings. Floor area ratio limits are specific and depend on what ordinance area they are in. And that's why each separate ordinance has separate limits. 0.25, 0.4, 0.5, 0.6. Avery Point was built within those requirements. Bon Secours, and we know what problems we have with those two areas on fire and rescue. Residence Inn was built at Capital One was built within those requirements. And they're huge. Imagine if you take away floor area ratio, that could be as much as doubled in some cases. So why are these limits important? Well, if you think about an acre, it's 208 feet by 208 feet. B1 is 0.4, or about 130 feet by 130 feet. That's a pretty big footprint, even though it's 0.4. B3 is 0.6. That's 160 feet per 160 feet in an acre. So the B1 footprint is about 17,000 square feet. The B3 footprint at 0.6 is about 25,600. If you remove the floor limits from B1, that 17,000 can be doubled or tripled up to 35 feet, because you take it, and if you go to a second level, you have to half it on the FAR. If you don't have that, you can double the whole thing. B3 is 25,600 and can be doubled again, doubled a third time up to 100 feet. That's almost skyscraper territory for Goochland. I'm sure you know the county population is 26,000 people, and every 260 people is equal to 1% of the population. So small impacts in population impact the county as a whole. The type of business and interior layouts determines the total number of workers, vendors, customers that will occupy the buildings on any given day. The larger the project, the larger the people. Statistically, many of the people that were working in these buildings will not live in Goochland. They will commute here, affecting traffic, fire, rescue, and police, just like residents. Now, no other development standard specifically limits the bulk interior and total size. And doing this limit helps maintain a rural character, charm, and heritage. Do you think removing FAR limits will invite developers to keep bringing projects that are right-sized in scope and bulk before staff? Obviously not. Do overly large buildings enhance rural character and heritage? No. Does the amendment satisfy a need of the county or its citizens? It sounds like it might be a little helpful in some cases, but overall, it doesn't satisfy a need. Does the amendment satisfy creating a convenience? Quite the opposite. Is it good zoning practice to remove tools from your toolbox you don't even know why they're there? I think you would know that before you try to throw one away. Matter of fact, this amendment will make planning staff, planning commission, and the Board of Supervisors' jobs harder, not easier. There'll be an endless parade of oversized buildings, and what will be your tool to control them? In conclusion, I said the developers should have the right to pursue a remedy, but let's keep our tools intact. How about determine what his real floor area ratio is? It looks like we saw that in his layout. Determine that impact and fix B1 FAR only if that's what you determine needs to be fixed. An economic development initiative countywide should be its own amendment, come before you with the proper justifications and vote on it up or down for that reason. So the bottom line is it comes down to who's going to bear the cost of this change. The developer's going to benefit financially because he can keep his original plan, he can get his tenant, and it's the county that's going to pay the price countywide because we chose not to stick to keeping our tools in our toolbox. For those reasons that I've stated, please consider, deny this amendment and direct the developer to modify his carve-out and fix his own problem, or defer and direct proper B1 evaluation and fix B1 only. That's a proportional response to a small problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Paul Costello, and I live at 2011 Sycamore Creek Drive in Mannequin Sabat, and I'm here tonight representing my neighbors who cannot be here. As Mr. Williamson explained, the floor area ratio is a tool that helps present the clearest picture of site development. In practice, floor ratios affect volume, shape, and spacing of buildings on a specific site. The larger the FAR, the larger the building can be. Understanding floor area ratio is a basic requirement for site development, whether there is a master plan or not. Zoning codes identify what the floor area ratio is for various districts. Depending on the district, specific property conditions and proposed building uses. For instance, a site zoned as B1 could have a different floor ratio than a site zoned M1, as Mr. Williamson pointed out. Goochland can use its floor area ratio tool to help achieve the desired intensity of use for a site. Removing the FAR ordinance will diminish the county's ability to provide guidance and direction to an applicant who wishes to pursue a commercial project. Intensity of land development will determine the character of Goochland and the load on county services. Therefore, it is necessary to have a FAR ordinance to help guide desirable limits of building intensity. Ordinances and zoning regs should not be viewed as an impediment to economic development, but rather as useful tools to attract the desired scale and economic development that's right for Goochland County. Our elected officials should continue to have the flexibility to consider if a request for potentially large-scale, bulky buildings should be approved on a case-by-case basis or not. Complete elimination of this countywide ordinance would undermine this important decision-making process. Removing a countywide ordinance as a way to respond to extra addicts' desire for a bigger, bulkier building seems extreme and unnecessary. There are simpler ways, as has been discussed, that this could be addressed. In summary, the applicant and planning staff have failed to provide a clear and relevant rationale as to why Goochland should delete its countywide floor area ratio ordinance. Please deny this request. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody. It's bedtime. We're all starving, so I'm only going to say a couple of things. In all honesty, I just learned about this meeting late this afternoon. I'm sorry, what was that? I forgot my name. All right, it's Carly Nino. I'm at 1510 Oak Grove Drive. Okay, now I'll restart. Sorry about that, guys. So today is the first time I put any thought into this piece of regulation, the maximum floor area ratio. But in 5 minutes, I was able to pull up the code, and it's truly the third little part on the principal area use and restrictions, right after minimum lot area and minimum lot frontage. I have a really hard time that the guys that do this for a living didn't know about that when it's right there at the top. And off the bat, the first thing that came to my mind is that Goochland wants to maintain a village look. It might seem like it makes sense to let them combine a whole project, various parcels, into one requirement. But when you visualize that, you can see it doesn't match up with Goochland's desire to maintain that look. You're killing green space in between those buildings. My initial thought before I started listening to the applicant speak was, well, why don't you abandon the lot lines, turn it into one parcel? Well, I learned the reason why they don't want to do that is because they want to sell off the individual parcels to the tenants. I don't think that we should abandon a code so that a one-off or every now and then developer could do that. I understand why it would make more sense to them to be able to sell off the parcels. But I also have a hard time believing that the county created a code, included this, put all this work into it and hadn't thought it through. I can't understand why we would throw that away on one application without enough data to even know And I think we've already seen that minimum lot area setbacks, those things are not going to fully take into account what Goochland wants to accomplish with the village look. I feel like this is almost like an air raid, like they're just dropping a big bomb on you guys, like just get rid of it completely. And I don't think that's the way that we should do it. I think taking an individualized approach is going to meet the county's goals better overall, whether they're economic development or part of the village plan to look more like how we want it to look versus being big conglomerates of buildings together that are treated as if one parcel when they're actually not. I think there's other ways that the applicants can go about that that might be more time consuming for them, but better for the county. Thank you.
My name's Steve Levitt. I live at 7036 Ben Hall Circle. I've spent probably 2 hours talking with with Ms. Sherry and Mr. Cash regarding this issue. And fundamentally, I have a question. Why does somebody who doesn't live in Goochland, he does not represent any landowner, he doesn't have a standing to come into Goochland and say, I think Goochland should change its rules. That just, it doesn't, in a court of law, he wouldn't have standing. But I understand what the issues are. When this parcel was zoned, purchased by Mr. Farmer, they planned to put the extra attic and Tyler Young, and they're going to put another one up there, and then they decide, okay, well, we want to buy the lots and subdivide it, and it's not going to affect, in this particular parcel, it's not going to affect anything. And I think doing a countywide massive change in the zoning, the ordinance is out of order. There ought to be another way which they can accomplish their goals, getting a variance or coming to some other arrangement where we do it for just this one parcel, if that's what the tenants or the owners want to do. But to change everything, I think is way out of line. I'm concerned about the parcels on the Johnson Road, Ashland Road section of Parkside Village, which have been approved. There's with Section 5 of Parkside Village. Then there was a requirement to put some other commercial, industrial type parcels there. And if you strip away some of the zoning and the requirements, you don't know what's going to go there, and you're going to have unintended consequences. You need those tools to restrict and control and guide the development. And I would ask that you do not pass this request. I think it needs to go back to the drawing board, and I think that another solution for their problem needs to be arrived at. This is not the solution to gut something that the county's been using across multiple types of zoning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Margaret Levitt, 7036 Ben Hall Circle. As an engaged citizen of Goochland, I was pleased to learn by viewing the video from the retreat held in January, the county is responsible for protecting the public health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of Goochland, and to facilitate high-quality growth and development. Given this responsibility, I am skeptical and concerned with the applicant's request to eliminate the floor area ratio zoning tool countywide. While citizens are being told the elimination of the zoning tool will have minimal impact, why spend all this time and money to do so? I would suggest you as our representatives should be guarded when it comes to eliminating a zoning tool that is used to, and I quote, plan for and regulate the amount of developable density. As zoning guardrails are eliminated, citizens have found their quality of life can be severely impacted. For instance, the city of Richmond has done away with requiring a certain number of parking spaces based on the size of a building. creating a nightmare for residents living around West Hampton Bakery at Libby and Patterson, where developers are seeking to erect a 4-story building with no viable plans for parking. As I watch development in Henrico, structures are built with no or minimal buffers right next to major roadways, presenting a very real safety concern and as a recipe for disaster. As a citizen living in Parkside Village, located in District 4, I understand all too well we are in the bullseye for development. I'm eager to work with the county for a sensible and balanced approach to such growth, and to that end, I do respectfully request you deny this application. So some comments off the cuff. If you want to bring things back to Goochland, parking at the medical building, I believe Virginia Urology is located there on Broad Street. They haven't even leased out all those parcels. Parking is already an issue. They're parking in that neighborhood. Now I wonder, the applicant for this parcel near Parkside, which you all should understand and remember, the citizens of Parkside Village worked with committees with the applicant. And I feel that they worked with us in a disingenuous manner, because I wonder, what are their real plans for that parcel? It's very invasive to our community. It is accessed through our community, not off Pouncey Track. So the reason we were amenable to extra attic was low traffic. So what's going to change in the future? Just like with the wedding venue, they come in here with one application. Citizens had no input with the changes that you made, which were significant. So I wanted to start off the new year positively, working to better the county. And I'm frustrated because citizens are kind of left out of the process, and they're dealt with in a disingenuous manner.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else, anybody else wish to speak?
Good evening, Andrew Browning, 923 Stonecastle Drive. I guess I caused all this problem. So I've been practicing engineering in Goochland County for 20 years at least, and the FAR has been in the ordinance as long as I can remember. And so most of the time it was just a number we put on the cover of the plan, and it was never an issue. And so this is the only instance that I've ever had an issue with it, honestly. And so we did know it was there. We did know we had to meet it. That's why that number is .399 that went in with the zoning. What I didn't know is how it was interpreted. And so I interpreted, as Mr. Cash interpreted, that it would go with that site. And so we could, come in and subdivide commercially, and as long as we met it as a whole, it met the FAR. And so I asked Ray that question, and he thought as I thought, but then as we dove into it, that's not what the ordinance really says. And so, again, what we'd like to do is carve out those 3 parcels and have 3 separate owners. We're not trying to pull the wool over anybody's eyes. We're not trying to change the plan. We're not trying to do anything disingenuous. It just, the way the ordinance came out, this is how it came about. Not trying to be disrespectful comparing us to Hanover County, but in Hanover County, we did something recently like this, and they would look at that as a whole, and then the whole commercial subdivision of the parcel meets all the setback requirements, parking requirements, buffers, and that type of thing. And then you can go in internally and carve out lot lines however you see fit. And you can sell those parcels, and they can be right along a building. The building setbacks do not have to be met from the internal parcel lines. So that we would do the overall, and then we could carve up the individual parcels, and they could sell those out. Where I see that could be maybe like where Town and Country is, and Rocco's and Taylor's. If that were one and they wanted to come in and individually sell some of those out, they could have a problem with FAR requirements, depending on how they parceled them. But I just wanted to say, we knew that was there. I guess we misinterpreted it. That's the reason we're asking for the change. And it was not our idea to change all of the ordinance and all the, all the MPUD, the M1, M2, B1, B2. We were trying to figure out what the interpretation was on this one. Is there an exception process? Can we just change it for B1? And then the county suggested we make the other changes. So that's all I had to say. That's how this arose, and that was how it became, and I guess it turned in a little bit more. Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak? We'll close the public hearing. The applicant like to answer any questions?
Yes, sir. I'll try and make this really short. I know we all want to go home. I did want to just reiterate, and actually, I'm going to correct Andrew for a second. I think that the ordinance is still ambiguous as to actually how FAR is to be applied. It does not say per parcel. It does not say per project. That's really the problem. And, you know, just to respond to anybody who thought anybody should have seen this a mile away, the planning staff here didn't even know or agree. So it's not like it was a foreseeable issue that the developer should have been able to plan around. In fact, it was just the opposite. The developer tried to plan around it and thought the requirement was being met. The other thing I want to say, there's been a lot of talk about focusing on how this is a proposed amendment coming from the development community or a single developer. Just because there's a single instance that gives rise to, maybe looking at making a change to the ordinance that comes from the development community does not mean that it's pro-development necessarily. And I would argue that just about every change that's ever made to ordinances comes from some specific example at some point. We don't have enough time to just sit around dreaming up new things unless there's a practical problem. We're practical problem solvers, so we see a problem, we try to solve it. That's really all this was. We were working with the staff to try to come up with a solution. As I said from the beginning, there are other possibilities here that might not be as expansive. It sounds like from the feedback we're hearing, people are concerned about the expansiveness of this amendment. I'm fine as the applicant with looking at ways to scale it back. As I said, I was looking at just applying this to really clarifying how FAR is applied on a per project basis versus per parcel. That would take care of the issue for me as far as I'm concerned. Also, as Mr. Cash pointed out, another option would be to just allow there to be a way to ask for an exception to the FAR. We don't even have that currently in the county ordinance. So, yeah, I'm open to talking about other options, and, it doesn't have to be exactly this way. And my experience, usually when the county staff recommends a certain path, it's a good idea to follow what the county staff recommends, and so that's what we did here.
Well, thank you.
Yes,
Well,
sir.
In response to that, we're here only dealing with this particular amendment to the countywide ordinance. We're not really dealing with a specific application. We're dealing with a countywide ordinance. And unless you want to withdraw this, we have to vote on it as it's presented, dealing with all the different districts. I want to thank the citizens who spoke tonight. I think they were very articulate. They had really done their research. And it just shows to me how much they really care about the development that's happening in the county. I think they presented a lot of information and really dissected this, more from the standpoint that, and I won't speak for anybody else on the board, but from what the board knew that this was going to do, they really carved it up well. And like I said before, I don't like voting on stuff when I don't know what I don't know. And, once you start going in and changing all these other areas, you create issues. And we don't know what they are yet until they come up. And then, a lot of times by then, it's too late. It's my feeling that this particular countywide ordinance as presented should be denied. Anyone else for discussion?
I guess, Mr. Cash, this can't be solved, so we're not necessarily thinking about their problem, but what we're being asked to do, being as Thomas uncomfortable with it. Is there any other way of getting around this issue other than the county, doing the countywide ordinance? Yeah.
Right. Again, that would also involve a code amendment. And there's a couple different ways that we can take that down. We could do the project basis. It's a little bit difficult when your base districts. It's easy to do that in RPUD and PUD. There's a way also you could just build in the exception. Really comes down to is, and that's a conversation we can have with the planning commission or the board and as well as the applicant, is to say, how, is there a criteria we want? Is there a way that we should do this? Does it need to come through a zoning process? If it's already a base zoning, is there a way that we can just build in an exception under certain circumstances? So there's a couple different ways to take it down. I'd be happy to hear from the commission which one you'd kind of be comfortable with to do that. It's unfortunate, it's the way the ordinance is kind of set up. You certainly have certain standards in there. We just don't really have flexibility to work out. Now, that's not always a bad thing. Again, you want to have standards. You want to make sure people, this is like, I agree with everyone here. This is our expectations. But this is one of those that maybe it's a good way we can build in an exception process. And if I don't know if that asks the applicant if they're doing a defer, that we could amend the request or something like that to come back with an alternative for that. But that would be, get up to y'all.
I guess my question would be is if, the case as it stands, changing the entire, something countywide, if we're addressing the applicant's other project that as a whole fits, and due to the division, it doesn't, where two are well exceed the FAR, and
Right.
the one is just over, I would say that we would hear that at a different case,
So that would be the exception.
yeah. Or you would-
Right.
Or whatever method staff
But-
and the applicant work with to come back.
Right.
So certain projects and
But
certain
as
exceptions.
presented to us, like Mr. Rockacharlie's, the motion is to recommend denial based on what it is, but I mean.
Yeah, I certainly think that this has raised issues. And I think they can be addressed, but it can't be addressed within the context of what we're to vote on right now. Now, I think it would behoove the county to go back and look at it, and, we have conditional use permits for almost all of our projects, and I think a way to dial in on a specific project in a certain district would be a way to do that, and not have to affect everything countywide all the time.
Right. I definitely understands.
Mr. Cash,
Mhm.
the FAR requirement be more of a problem for a residential project or a commercial project?
Truthfully, we don't apply them in our residential.
That's what I thought.
But, again, we have same regulations in residential height, setbacks, things like that. We just don't apply that. What comes in there is when you talk about use on the lot of multifamily. Now, FAR is used a lot of times in intense districts, and in fact, we reference FAR in our planned unit development for the multifamily. So it's utilized in both ways. Our ordinance doesn't do that. It distinguishes between residential and commercial for that.
I'm still trying to reconcile in my mind, what the real use of it. And I hate to believe that this is this late, because I know everybody wants to go home and cook. But for my own information, let's consider a building with a 10,000 square foot footprint. Okay? Now, or two buildings, both with 10,000 square foot footprints, both 30 feet high, okay? One of them has one floor, the other one has 3 floors.
Right.
Now, the one with one floor would only be useful in, say, a manufacturing plant where you need overhead cranes or something like that.
Right.
So you need a high ceiling, right? But the 3-story building would more likely be a residential, something like an apartment complex.
Right, or an office, even if you went commercial scenario, right? So the impact or bulk on the land is the same, and so, but you get the floor area is different, distinction, yeah.
But one of them would have an FAR 3 times as high as the other one. Okay?
Right. And so that's kind of, and that's where you come into is parking setbacks, everything else goes in there. The building itself is the same. So, you know, a lot of the scenarios that came up tonight, well, you have 10,000, okay? Well, if that 10, right, and 30,000 of a user that's office, square footage, or whatever else, and I've provided those examples around here, you end up having, you've got to provide additional parking. You got to do all these other things that are the more to limit what the usefulness of that lot is. So those tools are already there versus FAR. Now, again, which is FAR, I have seen it in ordinances, you know, broad, like not counties, not rural counties. It's over, and when you get into typically stuff like urban areas and stuff, because that's a tool that you can start calculating how many units you anticipate. I always wonder how you really do that, because those units get smaller and smaller, especially when you get into some urban type areas. But that was the concept. But again, you know, that's part of the, you know, when you look at a building, you think of its form. And I would say a lot of times when you get into form-based code and those type of things, and even like we think of our design districts, I'm not so much worried about what's in the building as long as it looks right. That's form-based code. Incentive zoning is, you know, the more you put in that building, the other type offsets you can get. You can, you know, if you give us more, or rather, if you give us more open space, you can go taller. There's all these different types of zoning plays, and there's where FAR plays a little bit more of a role versus base district. So again, I guess it comes down to perspective. I think the building size is one thing. What's inside of it affects parking. The building size basis, it can't be above 30 feet. We're not going to let you go to 40 feet just because you're doing a different use. So, yeah, and again, there's always different ways to skin the cat. We can always, you know, come back. It's something that, you know, I guess I'll leave it up to the applicant. There is a concern that they do have. I do recognize, you know, that, you know, perhaps the perception is that we're taking a bigger swing to fix the problem. But we also want to make sure that with every application, we're not setting people up to come through a different process if they don't need to. And it's hard to do in a base rezoning, but that's how we'd have to work to make sure we do that. If the commission would like us to move forward, or if the applicant's willing.
May I just say one thing that may help? Mr. Roccacherla, you mentioned something about if you wanted to withdraw. I don't know necessarily that we've reached that point, but if a deferral would help and the planning commission and community would like to talk with me and the staff more about this in a way that we could amend the case, I mean, I'm happy to talk about it and look at another option that would be a little more surgical here. And I'm just offering that up. It's, you know, this is something that I think people have raised their questions and their concerns. And as I've said over and over again, it wasn't my intention to make this as broad-reaching as it has been presented before you. But again, this was just, I really thought that we had supportive staff. It seemed like this was worth giving it a shot. I'm happy to talk about other options, and if deferring would help, yeah, I'm open to it. But I think we need to have a commitment that we're all going to work together, talk about it, and really try to do something with it. Otherwise, we may as well not defer it.
Well, denying it doesn't mean you can't come back. And it can't be that you can't.
That's correct.
And you understand where everybody's coming from. So I think it gives you a clear road. Maybe not an easy road, maybe a bumpy road.
Yes, sir.
A road to go.
I
appreciate it.
I do think we could change it, you know, to at least to address what I think the big concern is, which is really just an interpretation and application concern. I think that's a very easy fix that could be very surgical and address so many of the what ifs that people have raised. That's the reason why I mentioned the deferral, that we could probably work that out in a month. But, you know, it's, you guys make the decisions, so I'm just offering it up in an effort to be cooperative and try to work with everybody.
Okay, I'll give you a break. I move that the planning commission recommend deferral to the April meeting of zoning ordinance amendment ZOA 2023-0002 to remove maximum floor area ratio in BN, B1, B3, M1, and M2 zoning.
To the April meeting.
Why not March?
Give them 2 months.
You won't be here.
I would say that, to take a couple of stabs. If from staff, I would agree. I mean, if possible, that would probably be a better timeline, so we have time to make sure to do that and have conversations.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passed. Meeting adjourned.
Mr. Rocket Charlie, we have other business.
Okay. Oh, that's right.
All right, open it back up.
We'll open the planning commission back up for additional comments.
What are we doing?
Click on the hammer.
Oh, we didn't finish.
Meeting's back to order.
Stop. We didn't finish our meeting.
We finished it, we're still working on the meeting. Okay. Mr. Costello, we're still discussing, so we inadvertently closed the meeting too soon, so I'll open it back up again.
We are at other business. We do have a director update that Ms. Sherry's going to provide.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry, this is not a normal thing that we have. This is only our second time of doing the director update. I'll make it very quick. I know everyone's really tired. This is taking place in, as kind of a replacement of our pre-meeting that used to have.
Sir, could you take your conversation outside?
There's chaos. So we have on the screen, I have what I'm about to read. Last month I read it, and this is for the benefit of the folks at home. Just to give you all a quick update, at the February 6th meeting, there was no public hearing, so I have nothing to report on that one. Coming up in March, we do have 3 applications. We have Charles Sutton, this is in District 1, it is a request to rezone a piece of property that is A1 to RR for an additional lot. We have an application in District 3 for Chris Germain. He is going to be requesting to have an auto repair shop. This is in the Oilville Business District. And then lastly, we have another request from A2 to RR to request another single-family lot. That's in District 3. We do have 2 community meetings coming up in District 5. The Garnetts are requesting a conditional use permit for a detached family accessory dwelling unit. That will be located on-site at 5511 Rivergate Drive, and that's going to be February 22nd at 6 p.m. The other one we have to announce tonight is in District 3, Mount Bernard Venues. This is a request for a conditional use permit for a place of public assembly. The address for this meeting is on the location of the site that is being requested. It's 2371 River Road West, and that meeting will be on March 19th at 6 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great night. Thanks.
Meeting adjourned again.
Thank you.
Exactly. I know, wide open. I agree. It is rude.